Let's see, and we have one other member that appears I do not see listed. Oh no, I see them all. My bad. Okay. Good morning. This is Debbie Veal, and welcome to the April 21st, 2021 Licensing Committee meeting. I am the chairperson of this committee, and my vice chair is Song Oh, who is also in attendance. Before we convene, I would like to advise all individuals observing or participating in the meeting that the meeting is being conducted consistent with the provisions of Governor Gavin Newsom's Executive Order N-29-20. Participants watching the webcast will only be able to observe the meeting. Anyone interested in participating in the meeting must join the WebEx meeting. Information and instructions are posted on our website. I will announce when we are accepting public comment on the various issues, and the meeting moderator will open the lines as appropriate. I have advised the moderator to allot only 2 minutes to each individual providing comment. You can have less, but up to 2 minutes. And this approach is necessary and has worked quite well to facilitate these meetings and ensure that the committee has the opportunity to complete its necessary business and yet hear comments from the stakeholders. I appreciate everyone's understanding and patience as we navigate this meeting format for our committee meeting today. I would like to ask the staff moderating the meeting to provide general instructions on how to participate at the appropriate times throughout the meeting. Moderator, can you review that for us?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. So I would just like to begin with reminding committee members and senior staff who are not speaking to mute their microphones. If I detect background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will interject with a brief friendly reminder or simply mute the microphones. To facilitate public comment, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature, which we refer to as the Q&A. When the committee chairperson reaches a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, public comment will be requested. At the committee's direction, I will turn on and announce the opening of the Q&A feature, and we will display the instructions you see at this time. It is not necessary to identify yourself in order to make a public comment. Please note that the question and answer feature is being used only as a means for members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. Once unmuted, the member of the public may verbally state their comment. The Q&A feature is not to be used for typing out questions or for committee members to communicate with one another. If any attendee utilizes a profane name, they will not be called upon to prevent members of the public from being subjected to profane language. While you are free to express criticism or negative views, for the sake of members of the public participating on the call, please do not use profane language when making public comments to the committee. Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and I return the meeting back to you.
Thank you much, moderator, for that information. I will be calling, having breaks at the appropriate time. I'm anticipating the first break will probably be about 11 o'clock, but we'll just see kind of how the agenda flows. Just so you know, in case you step away, should we have a break on the screen, you'll see that we're on break in the approximate time that we'll be reconvening. At this point, I would like to take roll call and establish a quorum. Members, I'm going to call your name. Please remember to open your line or unmute yourself when speaking. So first, I'll start with our Vice Chair, Sung Oh.
Hi, Debbie, I'm here.
Thank you. Cheryl Butler.
Good morning, Debbie. I'm here.
Good morning, Cheryl. Jig Patel.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jig. Jason Weiss.
Good morning, here.
Thank you, Jason. And Albert Wong.
Good morning, everybody. I'm here.
Okay, that's great. We have full attendance of our committee. I appreciate everyone taking their time to be on the call today. And now that we have a quorum established, the committee will entertain any public comments for items not on the agenda. To facilitate this portion of the meeting, as I previously announced, the moderator will open up the phone lines for individuals to provide the opportunity to provide public comment. You are not required to identify yourself, but may choose to do so. As we open the lines, I would like to remind everyone that the committee cannot take action on these items or really discuss them except to decide whether to place the item on a future agenda. Ms. Moderator, can you please open the phone lines?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I have opened up the Q&A. If any member of the public would like to make a comment at this time, please type "I would like to make a comment" in the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference and we'll give you a moment. All right, I do not see requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, it's closed.
Okay, I'm going to move on to agenda item 3, approval of the January 2021 licensing committee meeting minutes. I hope members you've had an opportunity to review the minutes. Are there any comments on those minutes that you'd like to bring forth? Corrections, errors, whatever. Please remember to unmute yourself. I'll just go through the roll call to make sure that everyone has an opportunity. Sung-Oh?
No comments, and I can make a motion to approve the minutes if you like.
I would appreciate that. Thank you. Cheryl Patel, Cheryl Butler. Sorry, Cheryl.
Yeah, I would second that. I'm fine with it.
Okay, perfect. Jig Patel,
No comments. I approve it too.
Jason Weiss,
No comment.
Albert Wong.
No comment.
Okay, with our motion to approve the minutes as stated, let me open it up for public comment to make sure see if the public has any comments on the January 2021 minutes as as appearing in our meeting minutes, in our meeting materials.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I have opened up the Q&A panel, so if any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. And we do have a Daniel Robinson that would like to make a comment. Daniel, I'll let you know when you're unmuted. And just a reminder, you have 2 minutes. I'll give a 10-second warning. So Daniel, you've been unmuted.
All right, thank you. In the minutes on page 10 of 35, I had made a comment regarding pharmacists being recognized as healthcare providers. The following paragraph has a statement that Ms. Veal asked Ms. Sodergren if she agreed with Mr. Robinson's comment that pharmacists are now recognized as medical providers. I did not say that we were medical providers. I said we were healthcare providers. So I'm just asking for that one correction.
Thank you, Daniel. And we have no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right.
Sung and Cheryl, would you like to amend your motion to accept the comments from Dr. Robinson?
Absolutely, and I can make a motion to change the word medical to healthcare for the comments on page 10 out of 35 on the minutes.
Cheryl, are you
Yes,
okay with that?
Yes,
Okay.
I am.
Perfect. So with our amended motion and second and public comment received, I will now take roll call. Members, this is a reminder, please make sure you open your line for voting. Sung-Oh,
Yes.
Cheryl Butler,
Yes.
Jid Patel,
Yes.
Jason Weiss,
Yes.
Albert Wong.
Yes.
And this is Debbie Veal, and I will vote yes. Moving on to agenda item 4 is a presentation by the Accreditation Council for Pharmacy Education on academic dishonesty, including the accreditation standards. Just a little bit of background on the Accreditation Council for Pharmacy Education, fondly known as ACPE. It's an accreditation organization for the Doctor of Pharmacy degree to make sure that the colleges, universities that offer it meet and establish qualifications and education standard through both initial and subsequent periodic evaluations. The accreditation standards are minimum requirements and articulate expectations that ACPE has of the academic institutions offering these PharmD programs. As you recall, over our past several meetings, we have been discussing academic dishonesty. Today, I'm very happy that Dr. Janet Engel, Executive Director for the Accreditation Council, and Dr. Greg Boyer, Associate Director of ACPE and Director of Professional Degree Program Accreditation, will provide to the committee a presentation on the academic dishonesty and how it relates to the accreditation standards. Dr. Engel and Dr. Boyer, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I would like to share my screen so I can show you some slides.
This is a moderator, and Jan, you have, yep, you've got it.
Yeah, just bear with me a second here. Let's see. Okay, how does that look? You can see the slide?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, thank you. So good morning, everybody. Hello from Chicago. That's where ACPE is located. I certainly appreciate this opportunity, this invitation to meet with you today, myself and Greg Boyer. What I thought I'd do is start out by introducing ourselves. My name is Jan Engel, and I am the Executive Director of ACPE. I've been in this position just a little bit over a year, and my background actually is in academia. So I came from a large public university where, honestly, academic dishonesty I spent a lot of time working on that particular issue. I was a faculty member who was coordinating courses where we had students who were found, who have performed academic dishonesty. I was department chair, so I had to adjudicate as an administrator as well as the executive associate dean of the college. So I dealt with this from a lot of different perspectives. So now I'm on the side of accreditation, but I just wanted to give you that perspective that I've kind of been on both sides of this. And with that, I'm going to ask Greg to introduce himself before we get started.
Thank you, Jan. Good morning, committee. My name is Greg Boyer. I have been with ACPE for almost 20 years in this role of working in colleges and schools accreditation. Prior to that, I was in community practice for a number of years, and then also a number of years in the pharmaceutical industry. So unlike Jan, I have not been on the front lines of dealing with students in a classroom, but over the last 20 years, I've seen a good bit of discussion about the impact and the consequences of this. And we're looking forward to speaking with you this morning.
So today what we're hoping to do is two things. One is to talk about the accreditation standards with respect to academic dishonesty. So we'll go through those. But I think more importantly, we're going to talk about the methodology that we use to assess compliance with the standards, because it really doesn't matter if we have a bunch of standards if we're not looking at them to ensure compliance. So quickly, for those of you who are not that familiar with ACPE, we have a variety of roles. The first one is the one we're going to focus on today, and that's where ACPE accredits all of the professional degree programs for the Doctor of Pharmacy in the United States. We are recognized by the U.S. Department of Education, as well as the Council on Higher Education Accreditation. So we are actually reviewed and accredited as well. Other things that we do is we provide accredit providers of continuing pharmacy education, and we also accredit pharmacy technician programs. And then we certify professional degree programs in pharmacy that are outside the United States and its territories. But as I mentioned, we're going to focus primarily on the PharmD programs at this point. I'm going to turn it over to Greg for some background on the ACPE standards and our process.
The accreditation standards really are the backbone of the work we do. They're central to our accreditation process. We affectionately call our current standards, Standards 2016, because they became effective on July 1st of 2016. Prior to that, during the PharmD life, we've had Standards 2000, Standards 2007, Standards 2016, and I will mention at the end, we'll begin working on Standards 2025 very shortly. But what essentially the accreditation standards do, I call them the rules of engagement. They set the minimum standards for what colleges and schools agree to strive and to achieve compliance with those standards. In a way, they set the minimum boundaries by which programs must adhere. They certainly set no cap. We want programs to achieve greater things if they have the wherewithal and the capability, but our standards are designed to graduate from programs that adhere to the standards generalist practitioners, which is an important component when you think about some programs who might want to ignore parts of the practice and focus only on a specialty area, but our standards are designed for generalist practitioners. The standards, right now, there are 25 individual statements of the standards with under each standard a number of key elements which help explain and guide programs in areas of to meet the compliance with the standards. They serve as the basis for the school to determine compliance, as well as the site teams who go out and review where programs are in that. And then ultimately, when the board makes its accreditation decisions, they all must be made on the basis of the accreditation standards. These standards didn't just come out of the thin air. They were created by input from educators, regulators, practitioners, students, the general public. As I mentioned, we're working on a next revision of the standards. If you go to our website, there's a bright box at the very top of the banner that identifies this as the call for comment, which we ask members of the general public and the profession, groups of professional organizations, whatever it might be, to submit their thoughts on what should be included or changed in the current standards as we move forward through developing new standards. So that's an opportunity to input. And then when the standards are actually finalized by the ACPE board and put out in draft, there's another period for public comment. And so there's a great deal of opportunity for members of the profession and the general public to be involved in this process. Jan mentioned we are recognized by the Department of Education, and part of that recognition is that we have a defined process that we follow and do it regularly on revising and promulgating new standards. Next slide, Jan. And so where those standards come into play for all of us is every 8 years, a college or school goes through a full review of its compliance with the accreditation standards in effect at the time of this review. So approximately 18 to 24 months, surely no less than 12 months, before a program's term of accreditation is to be renewed or reviewed, the school does a self-analysis. They do a detailed self-study. We provide them with a rubric that guides them through the process for each standard and key element, which includes a rating of satisfactory, needs improvement, or unsatisfactory on each element. They also have 4 to 6 pages of narrative that they can write to explain and enlarge on what they're doing to be in compliance with those standards. And then ultimately, for each of the 25 standards, they have to provide a rating, a self-assessment of the rating of their compliance with that standard. That document then is voted on by the faculty. It's created prior to the vote by lots of faculty members and other stakeholders. We expect that kind of broad participation. Once it's approved and sent to ACPE 6 weeks before an established date for a site visit, ACPE has identified a site visit team, which is comprised of members of trained members of the academy, the educators, to participate, as well as members of the general public from the profession, practitioners, I should say, who have also been trained to participate in this review process. That's a requirement of the Department of Education, that we have a practitioner or an experiential director type person involved on every team. Many of you perhaps have participated in one of the visits in California, because we also, as part of our process, invite members of the state board to send a member or representative to observe the process. And the goal of that is to help you all understand and appreciate the rigor that goes into these on-site visits that occur over 3 days generally, where we are essentially there to validate the accuracy of the self-study that the school has provided us. We occasionally find disagreements, and when we do, we write those in an evaluation team report. But generally, we are agreeing and encouraging the school to continue on their path, because they do strive very hard to be in compliance with the standards. And so that evaluation team report is drafted, reviewed by the dean of the program for accuracy. And then the dean may disagree with some of the findings, but if this is not the place to rebuttal those kind of things. The team's opinion is the team's opinion based upon their understanding of the standard. Then that goes to the board, the report that we write, and the board receives the work of each semester at the end of the semester for meetings in January for the fall semester and in June for the spring semester. That is the only time they make accreditation decisions. They review these reports that the teams have written. They will look at narratives from the school if they need further understanding. And then they will come up with their determination of compliance with the accreditation standard. And that is the important determination. The site team is only providing a learned opinion, if you will. At the end of the day, the board is actually making the accreditation decisions. And those decisions can range from an 8-year term with appropriate monitoring during that 8-year term. They can require a focused visit to expand on things that may be rolling out, or they may need to shorten a term, have a shortened term because of things they want to check on more diligently than the 8-year term. If the program is out of compliance and has failed to bring it into compliance, any one standard or more, they can be placed on probation and in a period of due process eventually lose their accreditation. So essentially, this deep dive of looking at the standards occurs every 8 years, but that does not mean that ACPE is not overseeing its programs, because we have annual monitoring parameters that we look at. We also have some complaint processes that I'll talk about at the end that keep us engaged with programs all during that 8-year period.
So now what I'd like to do is walk you through a couple of the standards that are related to academic dishonesty and professionalism. This is woven into some other standards as well, but these are some of the main ones that we'd like to point out. The first one is standard number 9, which deals with organizational culture. And you can see from the material on this slide that that particular standard addresses professional behavior. It also addresses some other issues as well. But let me point out the key elements of standard number 9. 9.1 is leadership and professionalism. And the goal there is for the college or school to demonstrate a commitment to developing professionalism. And then under 9.2, in terms of behaviors, we expect that a school has policies that define what an expected behavior is for students, along with the consequences from deviation from those behaviors. So it's not enough to say students have to be professional. There has to be consequences for when they deviate from that. So that's what the standard says. We have documentation requirements for each standard that the school has to produce. In this case, for standard 9, they need to give us policies that describe those expectations of the faculty, the administrators, the students, and the staff behaviors. So that's included in that document, the self-study that Greg just spoke about. So this is what the rubric looks like. So this is part of the form that the school is collecting data, filling out, giving to the site team that comes on site. So for standard number 9, you can see I put a square around behaviors. We just talked about that. The school has to have policies. And then the school ranks themselves as satisfactory, needs improvement, or unsatisfactory in these little bubbles. And when the site team comes, they basically come to validate whether or not they agree with what the school says. The other thing that the school does is, as Greg mentioned, they can write 4 to 6 pages of sort of essay where they talk about what they do for a particular standard. And one of the things that we ask them to talk about in standard 9 is the strategies that the school uses to promote professional behavior and outcomes. So these are some of the pieces of evidence that we use to make sure that a school is meeting a particular standard. There's other required documentation. I'm going to talk about the standardized surveys a little bit later. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg here. He can explain how we monitor visits for Standards 2016. So I'll let him explain this graph here.
Sure. Right on this slide, you will see that there are 57 schools, and that's what that number stands for, who are in compliance with the standard. They had addressed the issues adequately in the board's terms to be found compliant with that standard. 11 were compliant with monitoring, and none were partially compliant, and none were totally non-compliant. And those, the number 68 then, if you add those two numbers together, that represents the number of comprehensive reviews that we have done since July of 2016, when Standards 2016 came into being, for established colleges or schools of pharmacies, essentially kind of their renewal of their accreditation. So of those 67 or 68, none of them were out of compliance with elements of the standard. And in that, I don't have data on the individual items of the 3 key elements in there, but in that, we're talking about opportunities for students to participate in student organizations and be engaged, examples of faculty participating as sponsors in those organizations. Students have opportunities to be exposed to lots of aspects of our profession, to observe members of our profession in their role and capacity. When there have been issues, sometimes those issues have typically been tension between departments within a college or schools of pharmacy, not cooperating at the level we might wish. Tension sometimes between the faculty and the school's leadership in the dean's office or the executive team, or a little more commonly maybe, tensions between the school of pharmacy and what might be happening in the broader campus. And typically it all hinges on financial pressures usually. So it's these kind of things that are representing that 11 things that we are monitoring. The professionalism aspect of that, other than these kind of tensions and behaviors between members of the leadership and the school itself, are not part of what typically is being observed as needing monitoring.
So the next standard I wanted to focus on is Standard 10, and Standard 10 relates to the curriculum. If you look at key element 10.17, that specifically addresses academic integrity. So This particular key element says to ensure the credibility of the degree awarded, the validity of individual student assessments, and the integrity of student work, the college or school has to ensure that the assignments and examinations take place under circumstances that minimize opportunities for academic misconduct. And that goes on to say that they need to also ensure the correct identity of all students, including distance students, which has become critical now with COVID, completing any proctored assessments. So this standard requires that schools make it hard for kids to cheat, basically. So let's just say a student or a faculty member is giving a test in a small classroom, but they have 100 students and they're fairly close to each other and they can't divide them up. So we're looking for things like, are you giving out different versions of the exam so that if you're sitting next to a student, the questions are all scrambled and the answers are all scrambled? Or nowadays, a lot of schools use ExamSoft and other types of software that do that for them. So, we're looking for making sure that the school also ensures that the assessments are done in a way that discourages any kind of academic misconduct. So we ask for required documentation on Standard 10, and one of those things is any of the policies that are related to academic integrity. So again, in the rubric, the school has to supply that information, and then they also have to rank whether they're satisfactory, needs improvement, or unsatisfactory. So again, we're looking for the data that shows us that there are policies related to this particular area. And then I'll let Greg talk about what we've actually seen in the field.
Yeah. And here is Standard 10. This, to me, is one of the most important standards we have. It actually talks about the curriculum committee and how the committee works and puts together and maintains a current curriculum. And so you'll see a little more monitoring going on there because this is such an important standard. And also the curriculum is revised sometimes in a major way, sometimes in minor ways, but we are always tinkering and improving curriculums that when a site team is there, will identify things that they may want to be sure play out in terms of changes that have been made. As Jan mentioned, key element 17 of this one has to do with the integrity. So there are, within this monitoring parameters of those 29 programs, there are 16 other key elements being looked at as part of that monitoring as well. The partially compliant really has to do with curriculum committees that are not functional. They have not maintained a current curriculum to the level they should. They have not been comprised of a cross-section of faculty, for example. Maybe one department dominates. Those kind of things would get us into the partially compliant standard. Jan did talk about the integrity component of this, and we do explore with curriculum committees, the things that Jan mentioned, increasingly with the online learning that we're doing now, certainly during COVID, but also the increase in distance education programs, hearing what steps have been taken to ensure we have the right student in the right place at the right time. And software has been a big help in that. Software that captures students' eye movements as they're taking an online exam. Those kind of things are expected and are in place when programs move into this kind of an arena. So we've been fairly confident and comfortable with where programs are in that regard. So I don't think any of this, I know none of this partially compliant has to do with that kind of a parameter.
The last standard we wanted to address was Standard 15, which is the academic environment. And that's where the school implements and assesses its policies and procedures that promote student success and well-being. 15.3 specifically addresses student misconduct. And there we're looking to see that there are not only policies, but that the school implements those policies regarding academic misconduct, and that the students understand their rights and responsibilities and due process for all parties involved. So in terms of the documentation for that standard, we're going to look at the student handbook or the catalog and any other information that's distributed to students regarding the academic environment. We will look at the number and nature of student complaints related to college or school adherence to ACPE standards, and Greg's going to talk about that at the end. We look at the school's code of conduct or equivalent, whatever they call it, that addresses professional behavior. So all of these are pieces of documentation that we look at to assure that the student or the school is meeting this standard. So again, in the rubric, the school is going to give us that code of conduct. They're going to let us see if there's a student complaint file, and they're going to rank themselves based on student misconduct.
And in this slide for the 68 programs that I mentioned earlier, we see that compliant with monitoring on 9 of those, there are 5 elements in this particular standard. One of them deals with accuracy of information provided to students, a complaints policy, and then, as Jan mentioned, the policies dealing with misconduct. And then, and those policies of misconduct need to include due process, right of appeal, those kind of things that we're looking to be sure they're included. Student representation fits in here, as well as student engagement in lots of things that's going on at the school. And then finally, the distance education equivalence. When you have a branch campus, is it the opportunities for students equal on that campus as well as the main campus? Or if not, that back up to number 1, the accuracy of information that was provided to those students, let them know that before they matriculated. So those things are typically what the monitoring of that standard is. One of the points about a complaints policy is that students have to be able to come directly to ACPE with a complaint. Sometimes schools will, their policy will say they need to start at the school, and if it can't be resolved, then go to ACPE. Over the years, we have weeded all of that out as much as we can, but occasionally we will catch a school that will be saying something like that in their complaints policy, and that does have to be changed because the Department of Education insists that the student come directly to ACPE with a complaint without a intermediary, a stop at the school itself.
So let me switch gears just a little bit. As I mentioned earlier, other pieces of data that we look at when we're on a site visit is the survey information. So what this is AACP, the American Association of Colleges of Pharmacy, administers surveys that schools can use. There's 4 different surveys. I'm going to focus on the student survey and the faculty survey. But these surveys are national surveys. They're the same questions that go to every school. And the one that I'm showing you here on this slide, this is for graduating students. So the school will administer this survey to their graduating students and get responses, and that is included in the self-study. Now, what I'm showing you here is the national results for 2020. So this is all of the schools put together that have done the survey in 2020 and what their results were. And I pulled out for the students question 55. It was, I was aware of expected behaviors with respect to professional and academic conduct. And you can see from the results here that about 98% of the students nationwide either strongly agreed or agreed with that statement. So it's appeared that there's really not a huge issue nationally. Now what happens is the school has their own data, and they'll take their percentages and compare it to the national averages, and then will comment one way or the other. They may be the same, it may be less, it may be more, but that's another data point that we have to see whether there's issues in these particular areas. Another question that's asked of the students, the college or school of pharmacy had an effective process to manage academic misconduct by students, for example, plagiarism. And here it's a little bit less. It was 84% nationally of students either strongly agreed or agreed with that statement. I will say that this is tricky. From my own experience as a faculty member, I remember many times that students would say to me, "You're not doing anything about this. You know, these kids are cheating and you're not doing a thing." When actually I had formally charged these students, they were in the judicial process, but because of FERPA, you can't get up in front of the class and say, "Guess what? I've accused these students of cheating and this is what's happening." So sometimes this data can be skewed because students don't always know what the faculty and administration are doing. So when ACPE gets a complaint, we need to go in there and find out, you know, what are the faculty doing? Is it because it's protected information that's not being shared with the students? We spend a lot of time educating our students about this sort of thing. And then if they see something, they have to say something. And then they have to put some trust in the faculty to deal with it. So I just thought I'd mention that because that was something that commonly happened, at least in our institution. So switching gears to the faculty survey. So now faculty are also surveyed, and these are anonymous, so the faculty can say what they think. Question 37 relates to, does the school provide an environment and culture that promotes professional behavior among students, faculty, administrators, preceptors, and staff? And here again, nationally, about 90% of the faculty said yes, strongly agree or agree. It was a little less for question 38. Does the college or school have an effective process to manage academic misconduct by students? And there it was about 84% nationally. So again, we can look at the data. If a school is significantly lower than this, then we're going to ask more questions and try to see what is going on with the school. I mean, sometimes the school has an effective process, but it hasn't been shared as well as it might have been with faculty, and they're not aware of it. Maybe the department heads know very well how to go through the whole judicial process, but the faculty don't. And sometimes it's just a matter of making sure there's better faculty development and more communication. But this is the kind of data points that we use to help us make some of these decisions about what's going on in a particular program. The last thing I wanted to mention was what we call the blue book, and that's only because the cover of this document is blue. When we're on a site team visit, the team, which as Greg mentioned, is going to be, it's usually a peer dean, there's faculty both from sciences and practice, there's a practitioner, there may be an ACPE board member, maybe somebody from the Board of Pharmacy. We have questions that the team can ask. They're recommended, they're not absolute, but we do have questions in the blue book that relate to professionalism and academic misconduct. So we may be meeting, for example, with the student affairs group, and we'll ask them, tell us about those policies and procedures and how's it going. When we meet with the students, we would ask them, what types of program recruitment materials did you get? Were those materials accurate? What were the academic policies? So when we meet with students, we'll get a lot of feedback. We do one-on-one meeting with faculty, and sometimes we get feedback there. Sometimes we get cornered in a hallway and somebody will say, wait, I need to talk to you about something. So we do have the standards, but I think we have a lot of different ways to determine whether or not those standards are being met. And honestly, I think most faculty are very concerned about academic dishonesty and want to do their best. But with the current judicial processes and due process, it can be a very long and drawn out process. I will give you an example. When I was teaching, I was teaching non-prescription drugs, and we taught it our third year in the spring semester. We caught some students cheating on our last quiz of the semester, if you can believe it, right before they're supposed to go into clerkship. So we went through the whole process, and it had to go through the university, and both of the students in question got lawyers, so that made the process even more complicated. And the question was, one, do we let them take the final exam because our core syllabus said, you cheat, you fail? And then were they allowed to go on to clerkship until the case was adjudicated by the campus? So, we had 30,000 students on campus, so there are a lot of academic dishonesty cases. So to get us moved up in the queue was a big issue. So I'm just saying, sometimes it's not all that easy to get things done in the as quickly as you might like as you're working through the process. But with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Greg to talk a little bit about our complaints policy and what we've seen related to academic dishonesty.
And thank you. And this is the final point or final slide we have, other than a summary slide. We went back in preparing for this talk today over 5 years and looked at our complaints file starting with January of 2016. And in that length of time, we had a total of 243 complaints submitted. Of those, 11 had references to academic dishonesty or cheating. 4 of those were anonymous, and we don't process anonymous complaints as a general rule. It's policy unless something rises to the level of great concern or student safety that needs to be explored. And then 4 of those 11 were from schools in California, just to put it into perspective, 4 different schools in California in that 5-year window. One of the characteristics of almost all complaints is it's students who are in academic difficulty, either failing a course or have been dismissed from the program for academic performance issues, and somehow think ACPE can cast its magic wand and get the student back in school. And so we work through student understanding that that's not ACPE's role, and that addresses a number of complaints. The other thing that occurs in almost all of these complaints that kind of rise to the level of, I might need to look into this, they have forgotten a key point or two that makes the real reason they're in the situation they're in clear. But we go to the dean of the program and ask them to explain what went on with this particular situation if the student has given us permission to identify themselves. And some are loath to do that. But we do tell them that we will investigate a complaint without using your name. However, the very situation we're investigating may actually identify you. And so that we go forward with that. In all of the instances except one, as I mentioned, a student left out a key element. And the key element is something like, I went through the appeal, and the appeal did not come out in my favor, and on and up through the chain of command. And as long as there's a chain of events in an established appeals process that the student can be able to employ, the school is doing what it does. We have no authority to overturn a decision of a properly constituted appeal process. And that properly constituted would be there's established procedures, there's multiple people involved, there's multiple levels, students have the right to appeal. If all of those things have come into play, then ACP has no authority to intervene. And thus far, that has been the case. Even in the one case that rose to the level of being a great concern, once we explored that with the school and learned a whole lot more about what was going on, there was, criminal trespass that involved, there was cybercrime, there was organized effort that was well beyond the expectation of any kind of typical academic dishonesty that was occurring. And even though the school had, policies that dealt with that in the normal circumstances, this heightened level of criminal behavior essentially negated some of those safeguards. And of course, new safeguards were put in place as a consequence of understanding that students in this particular case had unique skills, broke the law to achieve ends that were not to be professional. So at the end of the day, we're very pleased with the result that came out of that particular example. But as I say, most of what comes to us as charges of cheating it's in the eyes of the student who has been wronged academically and thinks someone else is having opportunities because of test bank questions or whatever that they really are not completely sure about, but they know it occurs because somehow they're not being successful when their fellow students are. There's always pieces of information missing from those kind of narratives that the school has been able to supply through their policies and procedures. And so the final slide is just to sum up that we do take academic dishonesty very seriously at ACPE. All schools are required to have policies. We review those. We talk about them on the site visits every 8 years, and even more if we're going more frequently for other issues. Through our complaints, we're engaged with programs quite often. We also have annual monitoring data that we look at in terms of enrollments and on-time graduations, those kind of things. So we don't leave a program alone for 8 years by any means. Any dean of a program will tell you we're in their face much more than they would like. So with that, I will thank you so much and turn it back to Jan. Thank you.
So thank you very much for this opportunity to share our perspective on this. I think, our goal as a staff is to help schools do things right, not really to catch them doing it wrong. And I hope by you seeing our process, you can see that we go through a lot of different data. We try to make sure that the schools are adhering to the standards, but if they're not, we're more than happy to work with them and help give them examples of things that they can do to meet the standards. So with that, I don't know if you're going to allow questions or how you want to proceed, but we are here and we appreciate the opportunity to present to you today.
Dr. Engel and Dr. Boyer, thank you very much on behalf of the committee for coming today and providing this presentation. Dr. Boyer, I've been actually on a couple of the site visits with you, so I personally am very aware of the depth and breadth of the site visit and definitely appreciate what you do. I know a couple of my fellow committee members have also been on one or more site visits, so we do respect and depend on you guys a lot to help us with making sure universities here, colleges of pharmacy here in the state of California meet your requirements. My main question is, as we've been dealing with this issue, is in our next talk, our next presentation is going to be kind of benchmarking around the California schools, the definition of what is academic dishonesty. But kind of what we hear is that sometimes students might not think that having access to prior questions or providing prior questions to from a test to other students is necessarily dishonesty. And I'm just, and that kind of comes to this whole benchmarking piece, but I'm just, curious, what your thoughts are on that, and even kind of listening to, what you said about 10.7 and even the survey with the students. I'm just wondering if you think they're clear on, exactly what dishonesty might be. I mean, looking at someone else's results, letting someone else take your test, I think is pretty clear. But, what about sharing questions with other students?
I mean, I'll just speak from my experience in academia. Some of that depends on how it's framed. If an exam is given back to every single student and every single student has equal opportunity and the faculty member did not say don't share these, that's one scenario. It's very different if a student goes into an exam and, we had a situation, for example, where a fraternity, every student was assigned a different question to memorize, to bring out, and this was an exam that was not turned back. That's a different, scenario than where everybody has access. And I think it's important that the professionalism policies and syllabi are very clear on what is allowed and what isn't, so that the students can't say, well, I didn't know. And from my experience, sometimes what I see is that faculty don't spell out those kinds of things as clearly as they could in a syllabus or in other professionalism type documents. And sometimes that can be helpful, so that if a student does engage in behavior that's not appropriate, you have it in a policy that says, no, you're not, this is not acceptable. Greg, I don't know if you have something else to add.
Well, when I was a student, we did typically get our exams back, and fraternities and sororities collected all of those. And there was always angst if you were not part of that system, because you didn't have access to those libraries. Now that we've moved into the electronic age, if you will, almost all of our exams are computer-based, and there is no returning of the exam itself. So I think there's a little difference now than when some of us were students, what we would consider to be academic dishonesty. And as Jan said, if you're taking pictures of video screens that of exam questions when you're told you're not supposed to, and of course you're not, all of those things are dishonesty. But as Jan mentioned, when you turn back paper to everyone, and whoever is the best librarian and shares those pieces of information, that's a hard call. Is sharing that dishonest? I'm not so sure if people were told, not to do that, then it is. But if they weren't, it's a harder call by far.
I'm also just curious if during the pandemic, since a lot of the classes are now at home and as well as test taking, I think you even mentioned it in your presentation, if you've seen any change in kind of the overall assessment. You look back to 2016, so I know this is a snapshot, it's a very small snapshot, but has the pandemic changed anything for better or for worse, or do you have any thoughts?
What the pandemic has certainly done has brought out the creative energy and juices of faculty to deliver quality instruction in a world that they had not envisioned, and did so very, very quickly. I think we can all be very proud of how this has rolled out, trying new things, working in different ways. We have seen a number of programs move during the pandemic to a pass-fail temporarily during this time. There's a little bit of concern on, again, some parts of students that we talk about, that there may be some inappropriate activities going on. But again, I'm not sure how you know that if you're a student, in your own little home office or at your kitchen table, taking an exam when there's full monitoring of what's going on through the software and those kind of things. So I'm a little bit concerned when I hear students say things that they are kind of assuming are happening with really not a whole lot of proof that they're happening. I'm not sure they are happening.
I think we're also seeing more use of open book tests just to get around that, so they don't have to worry about it.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I guess that's, then they're really more in the application of the whole thing. Okay.
Right.
I'd like to open up for questions to the other members of the committee, and I'll call your name and see if you have any questions, and public just so once the committee has exhausted their questions, and we will open it up for public comment of questions. So first, my Vice Chair Sung Oh, do you have any questions?
Hi, I just have some few questions for both Dr. Engel and Dr. Boyer. Just some general questions in some statistics for ACPE. If you could share how many schools are actually accredited total, and then if anybody who's ever failed accreditation was due to the academic dishonesty, and also if there's any state boards that have some special additional requirements for recognizing schools, because for California, we just say that as long as they're ACPE accredited, we will recognize them. But I'm not sure if there's any other states that added any additional requirements for them to recognize schools of pharmacies. Sorry, there are a lot of questions in there.
Greg's our expert since he's in charge of schools. I can answer the first one. We have 143 schools that are accredited.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
We've also had two programs in recent memory that have lost their accreditation, not due to academic dishonesty issues at all, but non-compliance with other areas of the standards. The last time that had occurred was in 1960s, so it's been a while since a program accreditation has been withdrawn or has not advanced as they would expect. As far as other state boards, I am not any kind of state board expert at all. I do know that there used to be some experiential requirements that certain states had over and above the hours that were required in the individual experiential arena, the introductory or the advanced. Some programs at one time required a few hours after graduation, or if students were coming from across the border, like Canada, those might have required some activity in the U.S. before they licensed. But currently, where those things are, I really have no idea.
Thank you so much for your coming here and giving us presentation. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Song. Cheryl Butler, do you have any questions or comments?
Well, I just like to say that I really appreciate this update and to see how how ACPE continues to update, and because I did do a walkthrough at West Coast University, and I was really impressed with the whole process. And to hear this presentation, to see what has happened since that time, to even take it on a whole nother level, I'm just impressed. I was just impressed with the presentation. Thank you. And thank you for coming. And I do remember also participating with Greg Boyd.
I might also just thank you all at the California State Board for sending representative on visits. We invite representatives from every state. Not every state sends people, but California is pretty regular, and we thank you for that.
Great.
Thank you.
Jig Patel, do you have any questions or comments for Dr. Boyer, Dr. Engel?
Absolutely. Thank you for your time today. I had the pleasure of assisting ACPE with accreditation of one of the colleges this year. And the process is definitely very detailed, and we appreciate all the work you do to keep the curriculum and the faculty up to date and up to speed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jig. Jason Weiss, do you have any comments or questions for for our presenters?
I just would like to say thank you, Drs. Engel and Boyer, for the thorough presentation. I found it very informative. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Albert Wong, do you have any questions or comments?
I don't have any question, but thank you for coming. Give us this presentation. It's very good, and I probably, if you have opportunity in the future, I might like to join one of the site visit.
Thanks, Albert.
That's it.
Moderator, would you please open the phone line for any questions or comments from the public?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. All right, our first person who would like to make a comment is Yu-Yen Lee. Yu-Yen, I'll let you know when you've been unmuted, and just a reminder, you will have 2 minutes to speak. I'll give you a 10-second warning. And Yu-Yen, you have been unmuted.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I have a question. Thank you. I just would like to thank you, Dr. Engel and Dr. Greg Boyer, for the presentation. My question is that I'm very interested in joining the site team visit. So how to participate in that team, and what's the procedure or a requirement or qualification? Thank you.
Thank you so much. To participate in the site team as a practitioner, you would contact us, contact me at ACPE if I'm on the website with my email address. It requires a 2-day training exercise that you would come to Chicago when we're able to travel again, and we would provide that training. And then once you've been trained, you're in the pool to be placed on a site team as a practitioner, and I'm assuming that's the role that you would be wanting to play. If you're a faculty member, the same process applies, but each person on a team fits a certain category or 2 categories perhaps, and then we just have to work through the system to develop balanced teams teams that have the expertise of seasoned people and bring in some newer folks for first-time visits, those kind of things. But the first step is an email to me, and we'll work out the process for you and identify the next training opportunity that we have.
Thank you, Yuyan. And the next request for public comment is from Ashim Muhatra. So Ashim, I'll let you know when you've been unmuted. And Ashim, you've been unmuted.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation, Dr. Boyer. I was just wondering if we can have access to these slides and this information so we can share with our schools. Thank you.
We did give a copy of this to the Board of Pharmacy. If you want to send an email to me or Greg, we would be happy to send these to you.
All right, this is the moderator. Thank you very much. And Ashim says thank you as well. And that is the end currently of requests for public comment. Madam Chairperson, would you like me to go ahead and close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please, Ms. Moderator.
You're welcome. It's closed.
Okay, with that, I'm going to move on to agenda item 5, which is a presentation, discussion, and consideration of California schools pharmacy policies related to academic dishonesty and code of conduct. As you read in our meeting materials as part of our January 2021 committee meeting, we received a presentation from representatives of the University of California, including its approach to academic dishonesty and best practices for creating an environment that discourages such behavior. Further, Dr. Guglielmo, Dean of the UCSF School of Pharmacy, offered to assist the committee with review of academic misconduct policies and procedures used by the various California pharmacy schools. I'm very happy to invite Dr. Guglielmo to share with the committee the findings of his review and assessment of the California Schools of Pharmacy's academic misconduct policies and procedures, and also to thank him for the time and effort that he had to put this presentation together and to do this review. We appreciate your expertise. Because academic dishonesty is not unique to pharmacy schools. I understand there was a recent news article where it actually talked about it happening at West Point. But with that, let me hand the floor over to Dr. Guglielmo. Moderator, would you please?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Dr. Guglielmo was a panelist early on. I did promote him, and I'm not seeing him now, so I don't know if he had a technical issue and fell off. I am looking in the attendee list, and I'm not seeing him there either, although we have one call-in individual that I can check and just make sure it's not him. So let me do that. Hello, this is the moderator talking to the call-in user. Is this Dr. Guglielmo? All right, I'll go ahead and mute that line. So I do not see Dr. Guglielmo either as an attendee or as a panelist right now. Do we want to move on to the next item in hopes that he can rejoin us?
Anne, do you have any update? Have you heard from him? And Sodergren? Oh, she can't. Okay. She just texted me. She's on mute and is having power or internet issues.
Hi, my connection's been restored. This is
Oh,
Anne.
good.
I have not, but I'm experiencing connectivity issues. He may be as well. If you'd like to move on, I'm happy to send an email and see if I can touch bases with him.
Okay, let's move on to should we go ahead and move on to agenda item number 7? I'm sorry, let's see. I'm sorry, agenda item 6. Sure, we can go ahead and move on to agenda item 6. And maybe, Anne, if we do get a hold of them, I might. Yes.
Yeah, I apologize, Chairperson Beal. I did just receive an email that he is having some internet connections. They're doing their best to resolve it, so I will continue to monitor my email and keep you posted.
Okay, I don't know, Anne, if you want to tell me, because kind of the next 3 agenda items kind of go together, so I'm semi-interested in maybe if we're going to move on to agenda item 6 that we that maybe we move him like a couple, like think an hour and a half out, or I can like go to license. I mean, like go from the bottom up and hit some of the items at the end of the agenda. What do you suggest?
I'll go ahead and let him know that we'll move him to later on in the agenda so we can keep going in order, if that's
okay.
Agreeable to the committee.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, so yes, agenda item 6 was this presentation, discussion, consideration of a report by the Office of Professional Examination Services, documenting the results of our audit of the NAPLEX and Cpje exam. I'm sorry, someone trying to talk? Okay. First off, we kind of, the next 3 agenda items were strategically placed together because they kind of build towards a discussion in agenda item 8 as far as what we want to do at the pharmacist licensure exam. So as we go through each of these agenda items, specifically 6 and 7, I'd like to encourage both the board members and the public to limit the discussion item just to the respective area, so that we can have kind of the broader discussion in agenda item 8, where we're looking at, you know, what we want to do on a broader scope as far as the pharmacist exam. So members, as you may recall, licensing boards within DCA are required to ensure that the examination used for licensing, for our licensing process, comply both psychometrically and to legal standards. And last year, the board requested an audit of the NAPLEX and Cpje examinations to be conducted by the Office of Professional Examination Services. Included in the media material is an executive summary of the audit results. And at this time, Dr. Tracy Montez, who hopefully I see her listed, so hopefully she's on and has no problem speaking, is the Chief Division of Programs and Policy Review, to provide the members with information on the audit results and recommendations. Dr. Montez, I would open the floor to you to present at this time.
Great, thank you very much. Can you hear me clearly?
We can, thank you. And we can see your presentation right now.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present today on behalf of the Office of Professional Examination Services. This is one of the units in my division, and as many of you know, I grew up in this unit, so I worked very closely with Sonia and Heidi over the years. And again, appreciate your time and attention today to this very important evaluation. So the next slide will shows the presentation topics that I will be covering. I'm going to give you some background about who OPS is, the regulations, technical standards, and guidelines that we follow, as well as show some examples of our clients, and again, to reiterate the purpose of licensure examinations. I'll do a very brief discussion on the results of the state and national examination review performed by OPS, and again list some of the services that OPS provides to your board, and then open it up to any questions that you may have. So that's my agenda this morning. Moving on to the next slide, which describes the Office of Professional Examination Services. We operate much like an internal consulting business within the department, and we provide a variety of examination, validation, and development services to not only DCA's boards, bureaus, and committees, but also some other agencies outside of the department, which you will see shortly. All of our recommendations are based on regulations, professional guidelines, and technical standards related to licensure examinations, and I will elaborate on those shortly. However, our next slide lists our clients, and you will see we have a variety of boards, bureaus, and committees that we work with. It's important to note that the services that we provide range from general consulting to full-blown exam development and administration for some of these programs, to simply conducting maybe a California occupational analysis, a review of a national exam, and again, sometimes just some general consulting. So services range across these boards, bureaus, and committees, as well as the professions within each of these programs. Our external clients include the California State Bar, the nursing home administrators. I'm very proud to show the California State Bar as one of our external clients. This has been an ongoing relationship. They are modeling a number of their processes after DCA because we do have very structured standards and guidelines. So that's just again to show you who we work with. The next slide goes into the details about our regulation standards and guidelines. The one that is unique to California is, of course, Business and Professions Code, Section 139. The legislature determined that national standards were extremely important and wanted to make sure that our boards followed those standards and guidelines. And so they put this forward in this legislation. So each year we're required to report in our annual report, DCA's annual report, the extent to which our boards are complying with Section 139. We also follow the principles for the validation and use of personnel selection procedures and the standards for educational and psychological testing. These principles and standards require that to develop a valid test, you need a detailed description of the content domain of interest. You need to have a link between your test content and the job or occupation. You need to work with subject matter experts, which are our licensees, as well as testing specialists and so forth. So again, they provide the methodology for the work that we do. So in the event that there is challenges to the process or the decisions, we can fall back on and show the methodology that was used. And I want to take a moment too to say that the Pharmacy Board has always been in compliance with Business and Professions Code Section 139, and your executive officer, Ms. Sodergren, has always been very responsive and timely to inquiries that we have. So we appreciate the collaboration with your board. The next slide reinforces the purpose of licensure examinations, and that is they must provide a reliable method for identifying practitioners who are able to practice safely and competently. And these examinations must focus on entry-level tasks and knowledge important for public protection. So essentially, we're trying to determine or distinguish between safe people from unsafe people. We want to protect the public. In addition to being valid and reliable, it's important to be fair, and that's why we focus on entry-level task and knowledge. Although we may have personal standards that are higher than entry level, when we develop a licensure exam and set a passing point, that standard is entry level. That is, do no harm to the public. So at OPS, when we develop or evaluate examinations, the mission is to ensure that examinations protect consumers while not limiting access to the occupations. It's a balance between two goals. We find that balance by ensuring examinations focus on entry-level tasks and knowledge is critical for public protection. So again, we don't want to establish any artificial barriers. The next slide, please. So, according to Business and Professions Code Section 139, which again is based on technical standards and professional guidelines, if we're going to review a national examination, we must ensure that it meets psychometric and legal standards, that California practitioners are represented in the process, and then we also look at the California content. So this is, again, just a very brief summary of what is involved when we start this process of reviewing a national exam. Next slide, please. 3 parts, all of which I will go into greater detail in the next few slides. But the first one is a psychometric evaluation. We're going to look at several components of the national exam. So in this case, we looked at the North American Pharmacist Licensure Examination, NAPLEX. We also looked at your state exam because OPS does not develop this. So we did look at the California Practice Standards and Jurisprudence Examination. We also worked with subject matter experts to compare the National Occupational Analysis to the California Occupational Analysis. Again, I will go into detail about that, but it's essentially looking at how the scopes of practice compared to one another. And then finally, we identify any critical entry-level content that is not assessed in the national exam as compared to the California exam. Now, before I go on to detailing out each of these parts, I do want to clarify that when we do an evaluation of a national exam or exam that is not developed in-house, we do negotiate what's called a non-disclosure agreement. And so OPS entered into this NDA with the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy to identify what materials the association considers confidential and what can be released in a public forum. And so therefore, in the case of this NDA, it was quite restrictive. So there's much of the information that OPS reviewed we cannot share publicly. Rather, we are limited to the recommendations. Now, as the process plays out and we eventually share information, with the board beyond the committee, we hope to continue negotiation to release more information. California, tends to be very transparent, especially here at DCA. We will release quite a bit of information about the exam process with the exception of test questions, item statistics, things like that that could impact the integrity of the process. But we typically will share the supporting documentation. But again, associations differ in the kinds and types of information that they share. So I will speak mainly or go into more detail about recommendations, but unfortunately will not be able to go into a lot of detail about these specific findings. So having said that, we'll move into the next slide. This goes into that psychometric evaluation, which is the first part of the review of an examination program. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with each of these components as being members of the process or the licensing committee. And and observing these processes, but we have the occupational analysis. This is the updating of your scope of practice within your regulations. What is new in terms of what is being performed on the job? From that occupational analysis, which is typically a survey to current practitioners, those who are actively practicing, will come up what we call a validation report, and that will provide information that will then be used to develop your examination. Not only does it help to develop what is called a content outline, sort of the map or the outline of the test itself, but it will also be used to develop test items for the exam. So we look at the methodology used to conduct the occupational analysis. We look at all the procedures used to produce an examination or content outline. How are the test questions written? Who is involved in that process? Then we take it to the next step, which is how passing scores are established. What method is used? There's various ways of setting a passing score. What is the process that the association uses? Who is involved? Again, are subject matter experts involved? We review how that passing score is applied to the examination. We look at passing rates. Although there are no standards for passing rates, we do know that those professions that have more prerequisites to sit for an exam typically will have higher passing rates. We also look at how the exam is administered. Is it paper pencil, computer-based testing? We look at the security procedures. How is the association ensuring that the content of the exam is secure? You just heard a presentation on dishonesty. We're also looking to see if the association and the vendor that they use to administer their exam, if they have security protocols in place. And then finally, we look at information available to candidates. Again, this goes to the fairness standard. It's important that candidates have clear expectations on how they're going to be tested and evaluated. Do they understand how to schedule their exam, how to take it, to get results, things like that? So as you can see, there are a number of very critical areas that we look at when we do the psychometric evaluation, and it involves requesting materials from the association, sometimes having follow-up conversations, meetings with the association to clarify information. But again, it's a very extensive analysis that we did with both the NAPLEX and the Cpje. And so I want to share with you that after careful analysis of these components, both exams were found to have a substantial amount of evidence of validity. And as you may have heard in other presentations, validity is not an all or none concept. Rather, it's a process of gathering evidence to show that you can be confident about the pass-fail decisions made from the exam results. So both of the exams are very strong and robust. For example, the occupational analysis, the methodology used was comprehensive, it was timely, it used subject matter experts. In fact, subject matter experts were utilized throughout the entire process. We know that the passing score methodology that they used was appropriate for a licensing exam. There's strong security procedures in place. And as I'm sure you're aware of looking at the websites, lots of really great information for candidates. So again, we concluded, as I'm sure you anticipated, that these were very strong exams. So moving on to the next slide. The other part in this process is then to compare the national OA or occupational analysis to the California one. Again, looking at how the practice is described. So national examinations based on these occupational analysis, by definition, test aspects of practice that apply to all states, or at least all member states participating in that examination program. So if there's areas of practice that vary across states, they're not going to be covered on this exam because that would not be fair. It would not be appropriate for California pharmacists to be tested on something that is unique to New York. So the national exam is going to typically tends to be very general. However, we do know in California, especially with our healing arts professions, that there are many laws and ethics that are not covered in a national examination. And so boards have either state-specific or laws and regulations exams, similar to what you currently have right now with the California Practice Standards and Jurisprudence examination. So this is why it's really important that your board or a board continues to do a California occupational analysis, because there needs to be that comparison, and it needs to happen about every 5 to 7 years. Often our programs assume that because they use a national exam, they don't need to take that snapshot of California practice. That's incorrect. You still have to continue to take that snapshot because that's going to give you the evidence to support using your California exam. And so, of course, that is what your board did. So if we can move to the next slide, you'll see the graphic here, which just shows us how we make our recommendations on utilizing national versus state exams. If a national examination assesses most of California's practice, as shown in the first diagram, then we would recommend maybe a law examination or law and ethics. If the national examination assesses a portion of California practice, then we would recommend a California specific or supplemental exam. This means that there are some areas in the practice in addition to laws that are missing. So you're going to have an expanded California exam. Now, if the national examination assesses a very small portion of California practice, as depicted in the third diagram, then we'd recommend a California examination and not to utilize a national exam. Now, again, your board currently fits in the middle right here, where you have some overlap. Actually, you're probably more in the first one, where the national exam is covering most of the practice itself, but you've got the law and ethics piece of it. So you're about in that area. Our analysis, again, using subject matter experts who are actively practicing in the field under the guidance of a test expert, did confirm that there are critical California laws, regulations, and practice standards that must be assessed in terms of entry-level competence. So we did find support to continue use of the Cpje. And so again, very important, and that is because you did do your California occupational analysis. We had all of the data that we could compare against the national and found very, very important evidence to support that. So moving on now to the recommendations that are coming out from this analysis. Again, I want to restate that both of these exams have substantial amount of evidence of validity to support their use and the decisions made from them. But we did find some areas that we think could be improved upon. And so we have provided those to the board. They're in the memo. They're also in the report. And I want to point out that NAPB is seeing these for the first time as well. We have always been advised by legal that we share information concurrently because we have to be sensitive to the public and how information is shared. So they may at some point respond back to the board or the committee, and that's part of the process. Again, it's part of engaging in this cycle of validation. So From OPS, the recommendation number 1 is that we would encourage them to follow more standard guidelines for developing competency statements that can be used as survey items. So typically when you do your occupational analysis, you're going to look at how different components of your job is performed, what kind of knowledge is needed. When we do our surveys at OPS, we follow a very standard process of what is doing, why you're doing it, and how you're doing it. Those statements are then shared publicly so that students and candidates can better understand what is being expected of them at entry level. Sometimes with national exams, they're not as clear. And so we would recommend more detail to help with that process. Recommendation 2 is to phase out the service of faculty members and educators in the NAPLEX examination development and standard setting process. Standard setting is also passing score. The reason why we recommend this is to minimize conflict of interest and improve test security. If you as an educator are developing the test, that puts you in a precarious position of then going and maybe unconsciously teaching to the test. Again, we're not pointing fingers, but we do find that there is a conflict of interest here, and we have a policy on that at DCA. We typically encourage faculty members, educators, board members, and so forth to stay out of the exam development process. Certainly, their subject matter expertise is valued in the occupational analysis or scope, updating process, but we really like to keep them away from the exam itself and the passing score. The third recommendation is to provide some updated evidence on using the current passing standard. So again, I can't go into a lot of detail, but we'd like a little bit more information about that choice of how that is being applied. So those are our 3 primary recommendations for NAPB. Again, good, strong exam, just some room for improvement, which is always, normal, part of the process. The next slide shows the recommendations for the Cpje. Here, we would like to encourage the board to continue using large and diverse groups of practicing pharmacists as subject matter experts during all stages of examination validation. And of course, this is to the extent possible given examination security. We have been working closely with Executive Officer Ms. Sodergren to address each of these recommendations. That's why we have the word here, continue, because they have been great in listening to the dynamics about making sure that we use newly licensed pharmacists as well as those that have been practicing in the field and so forth, and how to include them with not impacting exam security. We also, very similar to this, we want to make sure that we rotate the subject matter experts, use new ones in all phases of examination development. We want to work with these subject matter experts to develop knowledge statements for the Cpje content. Again, trying to provide more information to students, schools, and so forth so that they have a better understanding of what entry-level performance is. It's very difficult to read a statement and not necessarily understand what entry level is. So we'd like to work to, again, continue providing additional information. And then finally, monitor different pass rates of the same candidates on the Cpje and the NAPLEX over time to evaluate changes made in response to the OPS review and other mitigating factors. We know that there has been a number of things happening with the exam program over the past couple years. COVID's one of them. And so it's good just to keep an eye on pass rates and things like that. So very happy to say that we have been actively working on all of these recommendations very early on, and we look forward to continue doing that so with the board. The almost the last slide, next one is the services that we provide. And as I've mentioned throughout this presentation, we have provided consulting services to your board. We're always happy to chime in and give our thoughts or our professional expertise with anything test related that your board may be doing. We also, OPS provides oversight over DCA's master contract for computer-based testing, which does include a quality assurance program, and your board participates in that. We also do the audit, just finished the audit of your state national examination programs, again, finding that they're very robust tools, they're meeting standards and complying with Business and Professions Code Section 139. And with that, I will open it up to any questions that you may have, and thank you very much for this opportunity. And so you can advance to the last slide, moderator, and thank you for your help.
Thank you, Dr. Montez. So first, I'm going to open up any questions or comments to the board members. And once the board members, I've gone kind of through all the board members for any of their comments, we will then open it up to the public to see if the public has any questions or comments. So board members first, I'm going to start with Albert Wong.
I have no comment. I have no comment. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Albert. Jason Weiss.
No comments at this time, Debbie. Thank you.
Thank you. Jig Patel.
No comments. Thank you.
Cheryl Butler.
Hey, hello?
We can hear you.
Okay. I just wanted to there was a slide where there were 3 circles, and the first one was the recommendation, which was the NAPLEX, and I'd like to have her just kind of go over, because of the recommendation of that first of the 3 circles, that for her to explain a little bit more what would be the difference there.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. And that's actually slide 11.
Yeah, I was going to say, let me go back to that slide, moderator, or whoever's controlling the slide deck.
It should be slide 11. But yes, that's it. Okay, so in this situation, this is a generic slide that provides recommendations based on our reviews. But really where you are and what we would continue recommending is that first diagram where you use the national exam that measures most of the competencies, the sort of overall practice, but then you have a California law, and actually yours is called a practice standards and jurisprudence examination. So there's a small piece that is missing from the assessment, a gap. And so that's really where your board falls and what we would continue recommending. There doesn't appear to be significant gaps in practice missing per se, so you don't need 2 full exams, which is what the middle slide shows. And then certainly because there is a lot of overlap, you don't need your own exam. So your pharmacy, the pharmacy board falls into that first Venn diagram where you see a significant overlap. That's what you're doing, and that's what OPS would recommend that you continue doing. Does that help answer your question?
Okay, so being that, okay, so the national exam, but also keep what we actually have completely, or would it be a national exam and and some portion of also being a national exam, but pull out just California law?
Well, your national exam, NAPLEX tests the general practice, the critical competencies. So you use that, and then your California practice standards and jurisprudence exam is testing the law and ethics. And so you have that as a separate exam. And yes, you want to keep administering both of those exams.
Okay. Okay. So again, the difference between the 1 and the 2 isn't the California law exam also included in the second diagram?
It is. And in the second diagram, though, what's happening here is what we're trying to illustrate is there's a significant amount of general practice elements in California competencies that are not on the national. It's pretty rare to see this. Usually it's one of the other extremes. National exams are pretty good at capturing most of the general practice areas. That's why candidates are allowed reciprocity, transportability, and so forth. The hope is that what's unique is maybe some California law, health and safety, that sort of thing. So what a lot of our boards do is if somebody's practicing in good standing, they can come to California, but they may be required to take the California law and jurisprudence exam. So that's the difference.
Yeah, and that's always been the case, correct? That in whatever, pretty much any state you would go to, because of state laws being different, that would happen in every state. Correct?
Yes, primarily. I can't speak to every state, but yes, primarily and especially in the healing arts where there is, health and safety laws.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I really appreciate your presentation.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
Thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate your clarification of this slide because I think that this will benefit us when we talk in agenda item 8. Sung Oh, do you have any questions or comments for Dr. Montez?
Thank you, Dr. Montez, for your presentation. So I'm kind of like going along the line with Cheryl's question about this Venn diagram. And so basically, could you just elaborate a little bit of the content outline of Cpje and the percentage that Cpje's content outline that focuses on the law portion of it, and kind of explain how then we can figure out how we just focus on the law portion of it? Because Cpje, as far as I know, contains a lot of non-law questions. So I'm kind of trying to wrap my mind around how can we actually make it based on your recommendation on that chart that's shown here. I don't know if this makes sense, but.
No, it does. Unfortunately, I don't have the exact percentage to give you, but I can tell you that I was able to participate in the crosswalk meeting where there was the discussion between the NAPLEX content and what was missing in terms of laws, regulations, and practice standards. And the participants did an excellent job of pointing to very specific material and documenting that. And again, that we have to be sensitive. I can't go into the complete specifics of all that for security purposes. But they were able to demonstrate how best to measure and assess what was unique to California. And that's where we're having some ongoing communications to ensure that when that information is shared with subject matter experts, that they will stay within those boundaries and write test questions on that unique material. And that's why it's very important to have your board, your subject matter experts, and your test experts all together, because we want to make sure the focus stays narrow and on that unique gap. Otherwise, what'll happen is you'll have an exam that will continue to grow in terms of spreading into what the national exam is measuring. And again, that's an issue with fairness. And so I can reassure you, if that helps, that in my participation here, the subject matter experts were very good at saying, nope, this piece is unique to California. This part is more NAPLEX, and really narrowing that focus.
You know, Dr. Montez, this is Debbie Veal. As I recall, also a big piece of our Cpje was taking the application of California pharmacy law. So some of the questions may look clinical in nature and maybe align with NABP questions, but it was really what was being tested was the application of California law in those situations. Is that maybe a way to also clarify it for Dr. Song or Dr.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Thank you very much. Yes, really focusing on application rather than just a general basic knowledge, but how you would apply that in a situation. Again, that really differentiates, say, a test taken in education versus a high stakes licensing exam. It's really getting at how you apply that knowledge, not just recalling the knowledge.
Thank you for your answer. Thank you for coming here for presentation.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Moderator, excuse me, moderator, can you please open the open us up for public comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have opened up the question and answer panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. And I do see we already have some requests. The first one is from Ashim Mahatra. So Ashim, I'll let you know when you've been unmuted. Again, just a reminder, you'll have 2 minutes to speak and I'll give you a 10-second warning. And Ashim, you've been unmuted.
Moderator, I'm going to have you just put one more comment I'd like to make. This is Chairperson Beal. That public, please remember that we are requesting that you limit your questions and comments to this specific agenda item. Once again, we understand agenda item 8 is coming up, and we're kind of building towards that, and that would be a consideration of the licensure exam. So please just focus your comments on Dr. Montez's presentation. Okay. Moderator, if you'll please reset the clock for Mr. Malhotra. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This was an excellent presentation, and I was actually trying to type in the comment box, so maybe I'll drop that. Thank you very much. I'm just trying to understand one of the recommendations about limiting input from faculty. I feel that a large proportion of the experts who are probably involved in pushing the boundaries of pharmacy education and making sure that our students are academically prepared, a large proportion comes from the faculty, not exclusively, but a good amount. I do understand the concerns about question setting and exam procedures, but I'd like to maybe open up the discussion and take a little bit more of your advice about a possible compromise or about a possible thoughts about keeping faculty included in the creation of national standard examinations. Thank you so much.
All right. Our next comment is from Daniel Robinson. Daniel, I'll let you know when you've been unmuted. And Daniel, you've been unmuted.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to agree with the last person who commented. This is the first time in my 45 years of academic pharmacy that I've ever seen a desire to exclude academics as being part of a process in terms of content experts. Academic content experts are on our news every night, on every subject imaginable. In fact, they're credentials that are generally highly desired. Even if you look at the agenda, we have a faculty member with a 50-page CV who is clearly an expert in the field, and to suggest that and somehow we are compromising the exam. In 45 years, I'm aware of something that happened in Georgia, a dozen years ago or more, but that is just very, very rare. I also have a question about USMLE and COMLEX. These are medical licensing exams that are national and not state. I'm not aware of a state medical exam. So the discussion about the importance of doing a state-specific licensing exam versus a national licensing exam, I'm a little puzzled why medicine doesn't need to do that and pharmacy and several other health professions do. And I also really question, if you don't have access to NAPLEX information, how are you really able to assess where the overlap is? And maybe that was provided to you, but you just can't comment on it. I wasn't really clear on that, but thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Moderator, can I jump in real quick just to clarify a couple of things?
Sure, of course.
So this is Tracy Montez again, and I just want to clarify. We at OPS are not saying that faculty members should be excluded from the process. We are merely stating that they should not be involved in examination development or setting the passing score, but we certainly support their use in the occupational analysis process, which is updating the scope of practice. There are other stakeholder type meetings that we sometimes will use, or of course the boards themselves will use. So we do respect the expertise of faculty members. It's just in our profession, we have found that it puts them in an awkward position, much like board members, and it's best not to do that. But again, we do respect their expertise, but we utilize them in different phases of exam development, again, occupational analysis work. And OPS did have access to these documents, so we were able to view all of the confidential information that we needed in order to come to these conclusions. It's just that we cannot share these in the public format. So thank you. I wanted to clarify those 2 points.
Thank you, Dr. Montez. Our next comment is from Stephen Gray. Stephen, I'll let you know when you've been unmuted. Again, you have 2 minutes. I'll give a 10-second warning. And Stephen, you've been unmuted.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Montez. I found it very enlightening, and I am amazed at the complexity that is behind the scenes and all the work that you do that requires great expertise. I have a question, 2 questions. First of all, your slide did not include that one of your clients is the medical board, and maybe it is, but if it is not, I would hope that you would comment on why there is that difference. The second one is that under the statute 4200.2, the California Practice Standards pharmacy licensure exam has 2 parts. One is to test the ability to communicate, and the other is to test, as you've mentioned, things that are not on the NAPLEX that are in the occupational analysis. So if you could explain whether you validated that it does test communication, please explain that, please. And then my comment on the occupational analysis is, because of the laws in California, the practice in California is distinctly different from many, many states that the NAPLEX is used in. California, for an example, has collaborative drug therapy practice for over 30 years, in which pharmacists prescribe in all practice settings and all types of drugs, including all controlled substances under collaborative practice. And now we have the advanced practice. And with in particular with the bill that the Board of Pharmacy is sponsoring, which is AB 1533, that ability to prescribe will be an entry-level ability under the law for all pharmacists. So I think that leads to a urgency for a reevaluation of the entry-level skills necessary for California practice. So I don't know the mix of subject matter experts and input that California had for its practice standards, and whether it included the literally.
This is the moderator, and those 2 minutes were up. So we are moving on to our next public comment, which is from Michael Hogue. And Michael, I will let you know when you've been unmuted. All right, Michael, you've been unmuted.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to comment, and the presentation was very informative. I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask the presenter to comment on, if possible. Of the health and healing professions in the state of California, other than pharmacy, how many of those professions actually test upon licensure the knowledge of the laws and regulations in California, or have a separate law test versus a practice standards test or a practice capability test? That's question one. Number two is there was some allusion earlier to other states, and I'm aware that at least one other state, Idaho, has decided to do away with an entry-level law exam, only now relying on the NAPLEX. And in part, the reason Idaho decided to do that and go in that direction was because schools and colleges of pharmacy in the state require a law course for graduation based upon ACPE standards, and also because of the NAPLEX and the upcoming test there. So the state of Idaho determined that there was no need to do a law exam because the students who are coming straight out of college to get licensed in their state have just completed a law course, typically within the last several months prior to graduation. Is there any possibility or consideration, or did you take into account at all any consideration that the schools of pharmacy provide law instruction and that the students have to have achieved scoring sufficiently? The law changes, as I think Mr. Gray stated. We have new laws that pass constantly, and this is only a one-time snapshot. I question whether or not there is value in continuing to have a state law exam at all.
10 seconds.
Given that the schools of pharmacy are doing this already just before graduation. Thank you.
All right.
Hi, this is Dr. Montez. I'll just jump in. Some of these comments are kind of beyond my ability to respond off the cuff. For example, the number of states or other programs that use law exams. I can tell you there's several. I can certainly provide the committee responses to these questions to share at a later date. But again, as far as using the law exam, that is something that is based on subject matter expertise, your committee, the pharmacy board, and how they determine to assess competency. We do not look across the schools or the states. That's not part of the scope of services. We merely look at whether or not there's evidence to support the current use of them, which is why these types of evaluations are done on a regular basis. And programs will determine how and when to offer these types of exams. So certainly that's something, to note for the future. Things like us working, we do some general consulting with the medical board and other healing arts but not as extensive enough to put on the list per se. So I will comment on those that I can answer. Other questions that come up, I will have to respond back to the committee to share that in the next meeting. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator, and we have no further requests for public comment. Madam Chairperson, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
Okay, board members and public, I think we've been at it for 2 hours. Why don't we go ahead and take approximately 15-minute break. So I see it's 11:04, just to keep it round numbers. Why don't we come back at 11:20? And we will then, at that point, go to agenda item 7. Reveal. It is now 11:20. I'm going to just do roll call real quick to make sure we have all of our board members back in attendance. Song O.
I'm here.
Thank you, Song. Cheryl Butler.
Here.
Thank you, Cheryl. Jig Patel.
I'm here.
Thank you, Jig. Jason Weiss.
Here.
And Albert Wong. Thank you, Jason.
I'm
Albert
here.
Wong?
I'm here.
All right.
I'm here.
Thank you, Albert. Okay, I'm going to bring us back into session, and we're going to talk about agenda item 7, presentation by the National Associations of Boards of Pharmacy, or NABP, on the multi-state pharmacy jurisprudence exam, otherwise known as MPJE. As you may recall, as part of the Sunset Oversight Review, the board was asked to determine if it believed adoption of the MPJE is feasible, or if other action would be appropriate in light of the examination subversion that we have experienced. I'm happy to introduce Dr. Maureen Garrity, Director of Competency Assessment, and Dr. Michael Peabody, the Senior Psychometrician, both from NABP, to provide the committee with a presentation on the MPJE. Dr. Garrity and Dr. Peabody, hopefully looks like you have been escalated to be able to provide a presentation, and hopefully you're there, and welcome. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Good morning, and thank you for the invitation to speak today regarding the multi-state pharmacy jurisprudence exam, otherwise known as the MPJE. The National Association of Boards of Pharmacy, or NABP, was established in 1907 to support its member boards of pharmacy. So initially, it was created to develop and provide the licensing exams. And our mission very specifically and clearly focuses on public health and public protection. So NABP is located just outside of Chicago, Illinois, in Mount Prospect, Illinois. So my name is Maureen Garrity, and I started my pharmacy career in academia and then spent several years in various capacities within research and development in pharma and several years of retail pharmacy on the side. And I've been with NABP for 4 years in the area of competency assessment, working with this team of professionals who are committed to the validity and accuracy of our exams. And I've invited our senior psychometrician, Michael Peabody, to join me this morning. So Michael, can you give us just briefly give us your background?
Sure. As previously mentioned, I'm the senior psychometrician at NABP. I also hold dual appointments as adjunct faculty at the University of Kentucky in the Educational Policy Studies and Evaluation, as well as the Educational Psychology departments, where I teach courses on statistics and advanced psychometric methods. I've spent probably the better part of the last decade in healthcare licensure and certification specifically.
Thank you. We'll start with the next slide. So the MPJE assesses the application of pharmacy laws and regulations for specific states and is taken by recent graduates of entry-level ACPE accredited pharmacy schools, pharmacists seeking a license transfer, and foreign educated pharmacists who have achieved the Foreign Pharmacy Graduate Equivalency Committee, or FPGEC certification, and are now seeking licensure as a pharmacist in the U.S. So the MPJE is unique for each jurisdiction, and a candidate must take the applicable MPJE in the jurisdiction in which they want to be licensed. Next slide, please. So these are the competency areas for the CPJE and the MPJE. Sorry for the small print, but you'll notice that they're very similar in both the areas covered and the percent of the exam covered by those areas. So if you would like to see further details on the MPJE blueprint, they are available on the NABP website. So I'm not going to go into detail over what's being covered. So the next slide. This slide shows some comparison between the exams. So the number of scored and pretest items are very comparable. The CPJE is event-based testing at a PSI testing center, whereas the MPJE is continuous testing. Continuous testing is 6 days per week in a Pearson VUE testing center. New in 2021 is the reporting of a candidate's, both their NAPLEX and MPJE performance, as a pass or fail, which differs from the numeric score we provided in the past. Now, I'm not as familiar with the CPJE score reporting, but I can say that at NABP, we provide the performance report within 7 days. Now, some boards of pharmacy request that NABP provide them with the exam result, and they will in return communicate the result with the candidate. Others allow NABP to provide the exam result directly to the candidate and the board, and the results then would be found on the NABP portal. So only the Board of Pharmacy with whom the candidate applied could see the exam result. For example, if I'm licensed in Illinois and test for California, only the California Board of Pharmacy will see that exam result. Now, NABP provides an annual report to the member jurisdictions. And if a board requests customized or some special report, NABP could provide that report. The next slide, please. Okay, the MPJE examination experience. So the format of the exam, we require a 3-hour seat time at the Pearson VUE Testing Center. 2.5 hours of that is the exam itself. And then we devote a half an hour to having the candidates read and acknowledge that they've read the confidentiality non-disclosure agreement. And we have a tutorial that talks about all the features of the exam and kind of what to expect. And then following the exam, we have the post-examination survey, which we have questions, which over 95% of candidates do complete that survey. There are no scheduled breaks. That's not to say a candidate can't take a break. If needed, they can take a break, but the clock continues to run. There is forward navigation only, which means a candidate cannot go back to a previously answered question to change their mind. They cannot go back at all. So once a candidate is presented with a question, they must answer it and then proceed. Unique to the MPJE is a 30-day wait period between attempts per jurisdiction. For example, if I took the exam in Illinois and I fail, I have to wait 30 days before I can make an attempt in Illinois again. There's also a 5-attempt limit per jurisdiction. So if I took the MPJE in Illinois 5 times, I need board permission to be able to take it for an additional attempt. But if I want to take it in another jurisdiction, I'm free to do so as long as I haven't met that 5-attempt limit. Next slide, please. The MPJE is a form of computerized adaptive test, or a CAT. The CAT exam provides many benefits. One of them is that it's a pool-based exam, and it provides limited item exposure. So if a candidate with an amazing memory is able to memorize all of their exam items, it would not benefit another student because they would be seeing a very different exam. Another great feature is that items that are outdated due to changes in regulations, for example, or exposed, can be very quickly masked or removed from the pool without any disruption in exam delivery. A CAT exam targets the person, whereas a fixed form targets a specific point on the score scale. So for people at the pass point, this difference is probably negligible. However, as you get further away from the pass point, the error increases in a fixed form. Next slide, please. This is the application process and fees. So an applicant pays $100 non-refundable application fee. Applicants who require testing accommodations would post their supporting documents at this time. The board then grants eligibility, and the school would submit the candidate's transcripts to NABP on their behalf, on the candidate's behalf. Once the testing accommodations are accepted, eligibility is granted, and the education has been verified, the candidate can then purchase the exam. This is for new graduates, anyone who graduated from 2020 and beyond. Once a candidate can purchase the exam, they purchase the exam for $150 and is immediately emailed the authorization to test, or their ATT. The candidate then contacts Pearson VUE via the Pearson VUE website or can call Pearson VUE to schedule their exam. So Pearson VUE has over 33 testing centers in California. 30 of them are owned and operated by Pearson VUE. The other 3 are government sites. These are military sites that are available for the MPJE only and for military personnel only. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm quickly making mention of the license transfer process because it involves the MPJE exam. So license transfer occurs when a licensed pharmacist would like to obtain a pharmacist license in another state or jurisdiction. So NABP does a thorough analysis that determines whether the candidate who's applying for the license transfer are licensed pharmacists in good standing. So with the license transfer, NABP follows the direction of the Board of Pharmacy. For example, some states require the candidate take the MPJE prior to the candidate applying for a license transfer. Other states require that the candidate complete the license transfer application prior to being granted eligibility to take the MPJE. So we do follow the direction of the Board of Pharmacy. Next slide, please. Exam development. So NABP follows the standards for educational and psychological testing and industry best practices. The MPJE exam items are written, reviewed, and selected by each jurisdiction, that is, boards of pharmacy members or their designee, for their own exam. So item sharing is optional, and it does provide a greater number of items available for the exam. So each item is referenced to the regulation. So let's say, for example, I am in Illinois Board of Pharmacy, but I see an item from Wisconsin that's very similar to my regulation. As a matter of fact, it is identical to my regulation. I can use that item, but I have to reference it to my regulation for my exam. So each jurisdiction participates in the quinquennial or every 5-year review of the exam. So that includes a practice analysis, a practice survey, the competency statements, the resulting blueprint, and the standard setting. NABP has just begun this process for the MPJE. So the exam development costs are covered by NABP, and this includes the in-house item writing workshops that we host, the state-specific review workshops that we host, and the state-specific review workshop is the review of the respective boards of pharmacy item banks. That's an annual review. That's not to say that they can't make changes throughout the year. They are actually encouraged to do so. So there are other costs that are covered by NABP as well, and those include the publication costs, and the masking fees, and anything else related to the exam. And all our items are copyrighted and protected by NABP, and any security-related incidents are investigated by NABP security and legal teams. So speaking of security, I know that you just heard some interesting presentations regarding academic dishonesty. So NABP has an examinee conduct agreement that every candidate has to acknowledge that they have read and agreed to at least 3 times before they begin their exams. So saying that they're unaware would not be a defensible excuse. NABP also has a security team that monitors social media posts, eBay, chat rooms, and other forums on a continuous basis. So naturally, we take the integrity and validity of our exams very seriously, and we investigate every lead we receive. And the next slide is we are open and ready to answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garrity and Dr. Peabody. First, as last time, I do want to open it up to board members first. And once again, we want to keep the question specific to the MPJE. And with that, I'll start this time with Songo.
Thank you for coming to give your presentation again, and I don't have any questions at this point. Thank you.
Cheryl Butler?
Yes, I just want to also say that I was really impressed with the presentation. I, did not know that this exists, so this is great information. Thank you.
Jit Patel?
Thank you. I just had to make a comment that it was a good piece of information and was very informative. So thank you.
Jason Weiss?
Thank you very much for your presentation. No further comments.
Albert Wong?
Yes, I do have a question. So this MPJE is state specific. So if in California, they will have question more specifically related to the California, right? Hello? Hello?
Hello,
Yeah,
can you hear me? Sorry.
yeah, I can hear you now.
Thank you. The
Yeah,
California.
so what I'm saying is a different state. If you go once you want to move to other state, you have to take another MPJE, right? Specific for that state, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so it's so you have more questions related to that state if you take that state test, right?
That is correct.
Okay, that's good. Good to know.
Dr. Gary, Dr. Peabody, this is Chairperson Veal. I only have one question, and similar to the when we were looking at the results from our audit, are the questions, the state-specific questions, are they application of law type of questions like we currently have in our Cpje, or are they more recall type questions? And if you're speaking, we cannot hear you.
Thank you. So the questions are written and reviewed and chosen by the Board of Pharmacy itself, so the California Board of Pharmacy. They are all multiple choice questions. You can have it scenario based, but it could be the application of the law, if that's what you would like.
Okay. Thank you.
Debbie?
Yes.
Debbie,
Yes.
I would like to make a motion to move this subject to the full board and have them discuss it and make a decision whether we would like to possible transition to this MPJE for the California.
Albert, as you're aware, agenda item 8 is specifically about that discussion. So let's wait till we agenda item 8.
No problem.
No problem. As a committee, we'll discuss that. Okay.
Okay, no problem.
So moderator, I'd like to open up for public comment, and just as a reminder to the public, we want to receive comments specifically on this presentation on MPJE. As I've stated, we have agenda item 7, which is a broader scope, and we'll take into consideration what we've heard in agenda item 6 and this one for a larger discussion. So at this point, public, we would love to hear from you, but please keep your comments specific to the presentation around MPJE.
This is the moderator. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I have opened up the Q&A. So if any member of the public would like to make a comment on this agenda item, please type. I would like to make a comment and submit it to all panelists using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We are displaying instructions for your reference. And our first person that would like to make a comment is Daniel Robinson. Daniel, I'll let you know when you've been unmuted. And just a reminder, you do have a 2-minute time limit. I'll give you a 10-second warning. And Daniel, you've been unmuted.
Thank you, Dr. Garrity. An excellent presentation. I wonder if you could just inform the board how many board jurisdictions currently use the MPJE and how many currently do not. I just think that would be helpful information.
And if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Thank you. There are three jurisdictions that do not participate in the MPJE, California being one of them, because they have their own exam. Arkansas has their own exam, and Idaho has chosen not to have a law exam. Everyone else participates in the MPJE.
This is the moderator. I see no additional requests for public comment. Madam Chairperson, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please, Ms. Moderator.
You're welcome. It's closed.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Garrity and Dr. Peabody, for your time and presentation. We appreciate you and that excellent presentation and the information you provided. I am now going to move on to agenda item 8, discussion and consideration of the pharmacist licensure examination as required by Business and Professions Code, Section 4200. So now we've received the audit results, which was our agenda item number 6, and we received a presentation on the MPJE, which was agenda item number 7. This is now our opportunity as a committee to consider if we would like to recommend to the board continued evaluation of MPJE to determine if changes should be sought in Business and Profession Code Section 4200 to transition from Cpje to the MPJE. As a reminder, under provisions of law, a pharmacist applicant must successfully pass the NAPLEX and Cpje currently as precursors to licensure. I believe the policy question for us, given the prior presentations, is if it is appropriate to consider such a transition. So with that, and just probably as a side note, if we do want to consider such a transition, since Board Member Wong has already alluded that that's something he would like to see done, probably the first step, we could go to the full board, recommend it, and then at some point we would probably need to have a audit of the MPJE similar to what we just did with the Cpje, just to make sure that it would align. Obviously there's a cost involved, but it would be the appropriate next step for us if that's the way we want to go. Albert, since you spoke up a few minutes ago, I'm going to let you start, and then I will go to the other board members for any other discussions or thoughts that they may have.
Yeah, yes, I would like to make a motion to move this subject to the full board to be decided whether it's feasible for us to adopt this MPJE in the future.
And
I second it.
all right, okay. I was about to second. Okay.
Can I just add one thing? I think what we should do is maybe let's talk about if we want to make a recommendation to the board to move to transition to the MPJE. Is that what you're saying, Albert? That you'd like to recommend to the full board that we transition from the Cpje to the MPJE?
Yes.
Okay. And was that song that did the second?
Jig did it.
I'm sorry, Jig. Okay, Jig did the second. Do you guys want to include as part of your recommendation that we that we do need to do an audit of the MPJ. Well, I think it's necessary, but we might want to include in our recommendation that we will conduct an audit of the MPJE, as I believe is probably required by our state regs. Is
Yes.
that okay to
Yes,
add?
it's okay.
Albert?
It's okay. Yes,
And
okay.
Jim?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Debbie, I have a question. That would be OPES, who we heard from. That's who would do this audit.
That it's a state agency, so that is the one that we normally go to. I don't know. We can. I think our regs allow us to hire another outside agency other than OPES, but I believe that we normally would use OPES.
Okay. Because I think the evaluation and with the slides and everything that they showed, I definitely would support them doing the evaluation based
Yeah,
on their recommendations.
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree with you. I think that they seem like they're. Dr. Montez was very thorough, and I felt, I felt good about what they did.
Hi, Debbie.
Since you and I are chatting, is there anything else you would like to add to this discussion?
I would just say that I just totally support Albert's recommendation.
Okay. Jig, is there anything else you'd like to add? I know you seconded the motion. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Oh, I think that is it.
Okay. Jason, is there anything else, any other comments or discussion you'd like to add to this topic? Jason, we're not hearing you. I don't know if you are on mute or if I will come back to Jason in a minute. Song, is there anything you would like to add?
Just a question about, I support Albert's motion, and I just want to ask, I don't know if you, Debbie, have an answer, or Anne may need to jump in, or Eileen. I'm just curious about the process, because it is in the BP Business and Professions Code. So do we need to request a statutory changes at one point? How would the process go about this? Because it seems not that simple. So I'm just curious about process.
I believe it would be a statutory change, and we would have to do an audit probably before the statutory change, but I don't know, Anne, is that you speaking up, or Eileen, if you want to?
Yes, that was me,
Yeah.
Debbie. It's Eileen. Yes, there would be a statutory change, so I think it might be better to phrase the motion in terms of pursuing, further exploration of replacing the Cpje, with the MPJE after an appropriate audit, because even after we do that, we would then have to signal and try and get a statutory change.
Albert, I'm assuming that you're okay with the modification in your motion?
Absolutely.
And Jig, you too? Jig, you're okay with the change in the motion?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Eileen. Good question, Song. Anything else that you'd like to comment?
I'm good. Thank you so much.
Yes. Jason, are you able to unmute yourself now?
I am, thank you.
Do you have any comments that you'd like to add?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'm going to open it up for public comment on our motion and second. Moderator, could you please open up the, thank you.
You're welcome. So if anyone would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We are displaying instructions for your reference. And we have a Daniel Robinson that would like to make a comment. So Daniel, I'll let you know when you're unmuted. And Daniel, you're unmuted.
Thank you. So my first question is, I thought initially we had a recommendation to the full board to consider adoption of the MPJE, which might be different than what the modified last motion was. So I'm not clear on that. but I do want to point out that NPJE uses the same testing and psychometric standards as the NAPLEX, and it has 49 competency statements that go along with it. And I'm not even sure that an audit is required, since NABP has already been identified as having, meeting all quality standards.
So my 2 cents, Dan, first off, I think we are talking about the same thing. The committee is recommending to the board that we make the transition from Cpje to MPJE. I think our attorney, Ms. Smiley, just recommended wording it in such a way that is maybe more appropriate, makes, because it is going to be a statutory change. My understanding is we would have to re-audit because we did not audit MPJE itself. We only audited the Cpje, so we just would have to make sure that it stood up to the same standards. And I see Dr. Montez is going to give us a response. She's ready to give us a comment, so I'll actually defer to what she has to say. Is there anything else, Dan, that you'd like to, Dr. Robinson, you'd like to state?
This is the moderator. I apologize. I had already muted him,
Okay.
but let me unmute him because he did not use his full 2 minutes. Daniel, you've been unmuted.
No, thank you. I'm finished.
Okay.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I answered that. Okay. Moderator, back to you.
Thank you. And Dr. Montez, you've been unmuted.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm that according to Business and Professions Code Section 139, your board would be required to conduct an audit. And if OPS can conduct the service, then yes, we would be required to do so. And that it's important to clarify that although the MPJE may meet psychometric standards, it still may not necessarily be appropriate for use by your board. And so I concur that exploring use of the exam is important because an exam, again, can be psychometrically sound, but still not be appropriate for use in California. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Montez.
All right, we have another request for public comment, this time from Stephen Gray. And Stephen, I'll let you know when you've been unmuted. All right, Stephen, you've been unmuted. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you, NABP, for your presentation. I just want to comment on Dean Michael Hoag's comments. I think most of the board members know, but maybe the public members on the board don't know, that the pharmacy law courses in California are not given in substantial amount just before graduation, so that the later laws are in place. Most of them are given in the first year, so that students who are becoming interns have an awareness of the law when they go out for their initial pharmacy experiences. So that may be something to consider, to ask the schools to change if we go in this direction. The second thing is I believe there are requirements under the current California law as to which NAPLEX and which MPJE can be taken for purposes. It has to be, as I remember, the latest one that has been psychometrically evaluated and considered. So if we move to the MPJE, that would perhaps require more frequent audits of the MPJE. Thank you for letting me comment.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, this is a moderator. I see no further requests for public comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, Ms. Moderator, I appreciate that.
Okay, it's closed.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Let me call for the vote. Song O.
Yes.
Cheryl Butler.
Yes.
Jig Patel.
Yes.
Jason Weiss.
Yes.
Albert Wong.
Yes.
And this is Debbie Veal, and I vote yes, so it passes unanimously. Anne, I just have a question for you as far as agenda item 5 and the California Schools of Pharmacy policies. Is Dr. Guglielmo available now or at a specific time?
This is Joe Guglielmo. I'm available now.
Oh, that's excellent. We are sorry that you had problems before, and we appreciate you kind of letting us kind of get to, we had a group with 3 agenda items that we needed to kind of group together. So I appreciate so much your patience. So I would like to present Dr. Guglielmo to, I kind of had teed you up before, but let me re-tee you up again.
Sure.
Part of our January 2021 committee meeting, we had received a presentation from University of California, including approach to academic dishonesty and the best practices for creating an environment that discourages such behavior. At that time, Dr. Guglielmo, who is the Dean of UCSF School of Pharmacy, offered to assist our committee with the review of academic misconduct policies and procedures used by the California pharmacy schools, kind of help us to understand, what is the baseline. So we really appreciate your patience, Dr. Guglielmo, today, and secondly, you taking the time and effort to help us with this information and to provide your review of your findings and the assessment of the various California Schools of Pharmacy academic misconduct policies and procedures. So with that, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson Veal. I believe a document was sent out to everybody, but I'll briefly give you how I went about doing this and equally briefly what the primary conclusions were. So my methodology was I reached out to all the deans of schools of pharmacy in California, specifically requesting them to identify their policies and procedures as it related to academic dishonesty and code of conduct. I followed that up with an additional request if I did not receive an answer from one of my colleagues. And when I completed with that, while I received responses to most, there were a couple that I did not get a response from. And my methodology was I looked at their websites and specifically looked for it. And for a couple of them, could not find. Doesn't mean that they don't have them. It just was not possible. But all but 2 had presented their findings. So objectively, what did we find out from that? And I'm going to be very black and white about it. There was great variability in both the length and the associated detail of the academic misconduct. I actually sent all of these to you if you were interested in actually looking through each of the school's policies and procedures. And in addition, if you had a chance to look at my summary, you'll find that some of the schools use a campus-based approach to handling academic misconduct versus others have a school-based policy. Now, in those instances when a school-based policy is used, almost always the school would also refer to the campus-based policies. Next, many included what they called definitions of academic misconduct, and several of them gave very detailed descriptions on what they thought represented academic misconduct. But again, it was extremely broad in base, both in terms of scope of definition and the associated examples. Every single school which had those documents with policies, within the academic misconduct document, they had very detailed policies on exactly how they handle it once an accusation of misconduct has taken place. Again, and I think a lot of this has to do with smaller schools versus larger schools, Some schools used school-specific academic misconduct committees, but others, perhaps smaller schools on smaller campuses, relied entirely on a campus-based committee approach to evaluate misconduct and to determine what the sanction should be. Not all schools require students to sign an academic conduct or professionalism policy. It's quite mixed. And my last finding was that I'd say many schools use the oath of the pharmacist as the guiding document for professionalism, but there are others out there as well. There's the APHA statement from years past, and a number of schools have their own homegrown, organically created academic conduct professionalism principles. And those were my observations. I did not subjectively say that one was better than another, much like you heard from Jan Engel and Greg Boyer early on. By definition, every school has to have these, but as I said, at least a couple of them I was unable to come up with. Ann and I, Ann Sodergren and I had some discussion about these conclusions, and she suggested some items for consideration, and I'll quickly go through those with you. I don't know that we need to do that right now, but they're all good questions to consider, and I'll just read them out to you. Number one, should schools be encouraged to require students to sign a statement regarding academic conduct or professionalism upon entry to the school? I have my own conclusion on that, but that's the first question. The second question, should schools be encouraged to have students revisit that statement or some semblance of that on an annual or other determined frequency? The third one is, should schools be encouraged to develop a student professionalism policy if one is not currently used? And the last question was, is there an opportunity for the California Pharmacy Council to share best practices that would be appropriate? To remind people what the California Pharmacy Council is, it's an ad hoc group which includes all the deans of schools of pharmacy in California, representation from the State Board of Pharmacy, from CSHP and Cpje, and we have often worked together to, in an ad hoc basis, come up with ideas. So that is my report, Chairperson Veal, and I would welcome any questions people may have of me. Thank you.
Thank you very much again for your time. So members, after looking through these questions that are currently on the screen under agenda item 5, items for consideration, I just want to understand if you think it's appropriate for the board to encourage schools to take any type of action, or if there's any kind of action that you think that the board should take. I don't know, we could develop a policy statement. Perhaps we reach out to the California Pharmacy Council to see if they would be willing to, provide what they think the best practices are. So at this time, I think what I'd like to do is open it up to the other board members to gauge where you think we should move this agenda item, and the action, if any, that you think we should take. I'm going to start with Sung Oh. Sung, do you have
I do think we should at least have a policy statement, and thank you. Sorry, connection is not the best. I do think that we should at least develop policy statement and go from there. But this is definitely something we need to figure out going forward. So yeah.
Okay. Cheryl Butler, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I certainly agree that this is something that needs to be addressed. The the questions that Ann Sodergren suggested, I think those are good. I do like the idea of the California Pharmacy Council. And because of cases that we see, it is definitely something that needs to be addressed at the school level. I'm pretty much in support of whatever method we do that, by the questions, the California Pharmacy Council, or through something directly from the board. I would support. I just know that it is something that needs to be addressed.
Okay, thank you. Jig Patel?
I agree with Cheryl and Sung. Some sort of uniformity between all schools of pharmacy is required, and a policy statement, considering all the points that are here, should be done.
Jason?
Nothing more than I concur with my fellow board members. Thank you.
Thank you. Albert Wong?
First of all, Joe, thank you for coming back here this presentation. And also, I in support of what Jake said. I think we should have some kind of uniform requirement that all schools should have a policy for this purpose. That's it.
So it seems like board members, it seems like there's two items that you'd like to consider, and perhaps we need to recommend to the full board. It seems like number one is the development of a policy statement around this topic, which would basically take in consideration I think the first three bullets here, as far as a policy statement that would encourage the schools to to not only have this statement but have it done annually, and develop a professionalism policy, if not currently one in place or currently being used. So that might be like the policy statement. And then I also feel like I was hearing that the fellow board members are interested in possibly reaching out to the California Pharmacy Council to see if perhaps they would like to provide best practices or other appropriate action, since they are the deans of the various schools, that perhaps they're kind of our subject matter experts in some ways, and that perhaps we also do that. So it almost seems to me like perhaps there's two motions here. I don't know, is there anybody on the committee here that would like to make a motion before we open it up to the public?
Debbie, I can make a motion to. Oh, go ahead, Cheryl.
Well, no, you can go ahead, so I'd like to hear what your motion would be.
Oh, yeah, Debbie, you can go ahead. We can go ahead and make a motion to go ahead and do what you are suggesting. First is to recommend to the board in attempting to develop a policy statement, and also trying to contact and work with the California Pharmacy Council and to get their best practices.
And I would second that. I would second that.
So I feel like that's probably two motions. And Eileen, if we have two motions, can we create two motions and then open it up to the public, or do we need to do one motion, go to the public, and then the second one go to the public?
So are you talking, because it seemed like member O was making it a multi-pronged, first to develop a policy statement, but first work with the pharmacy council? Or are you talking about those being mutually exclusive? Because I think you can have a motion with a combined process, because I was also going to ask, if we're going to develop a policy statement, is there going to be a rec about who's going to develop it? Is it going to be delegated to the executive officer working with the chair, or something else? Or is it just first to seek the board's approval to develop a policy statement and possibly working with the pharmacy council?
Song, do you have a preference?
I think that we can have executive officer work with the California Pharmacy Council as well as chairperson to work together, and then they can maybe recommend a policy statement on what we can do. So it may be easier to do a multi-prong approach, but I'm open to suggestions.
And I would agree with that because I would want to see the California Pharmacy Council involved with that policy statement. So I'm okay with it being just one recommendation.
A motion. So would this accurately summarize what you want to do, Song, is make a rec to the board that the board develop a policy statement and delegate to the executive officer the ability to start drafting that, working with the pharmacy council if they'll agree to assist with that.
Do you agree with that, Song?
Yes, sure. I'm sorry, little choppy connection again. So yes, absolutely.
Cheryl?
Yes, I would second and agree to that. Yes.
Would you guys be okay if you add in the committee chair so that I could just kind of help with the process, or do you want to keep it just with Ann?
No, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair.
Okay. Jig, any comments on that motion?
No comments.
Jason, any comments on that motion?
No
Any changes?
additional comment.
Albert, are you okay with that motion, or do you want to make any changes?
Well, I'm okay with it.
Okay. So Ms. Moderator, I'd like to have you open the lines for the public comment on the motion that we have and seconded.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. I've opened up the Q&A panel. Any members of the public that would like to make a comment on this agenda item, please type. I would like to make a comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. And Danny Martinez is the first request for public comment. So Danny, I will let you know when you have been unmuted. Just a reminder that you have 2 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 10-second warning. And Danny, you've been unmuted.
Thank you very much. Danny Martinez with the California Pharmacists Association. I'd like to speak in support of the motion made by Member O. I think it's a really good idea that the board works with the Pharmacy Council, given the fact that Dr. Guglielmo's presentation did present some variability in what each school is doing, and with the Pharmacy Council having the representation it does with the deans, the associations, and the board. I think that's the best option to go. So we would speak in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny.
All right, the next request for public comment is from Ashim Mahatra. So Ashim, I'll let you know when you've been unmuted. And Ashim, you've been unmuted.
Thank you once again. As the Assistant Dean of Curriculum at a College of Pharmacy in the state of California, I'm happy to share that we are one of the colleges that actually do this on a regular basis. Even became much more important during the time of distance education, remote learning, because of COVID-19. So I agree that, some of our policy statements that we give to our students to sign before each examination, and then there are general policy statements at the university level. We do both at the college at the university level policy statements. So I would just like to applaud the board on their decision to move forward with this. I think very quickly, I'd like to add that from my perspective, I think it brings accountability. And as a quick reminder to the students, at least for our college, before every exam, that they are, they're responsible for their own learning. And I believe that, that kind of a culture, if we cultivate it over time, can probably offset some of the other issues that happened in the state a little while ago. So I'd like to applaud the board in this decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Malhotra.
And the next request for public comment is from Stephen Gray. Stephen, I'll let you know when you've been unmuted. All right, Stephen, you've been unmuted.
Thank you very much. I also personally support moving forward with the motion. I think it's a very important matter. And I do think that the variability needs to be reduced so that the board knows what it can count on, and it knows that all of these California graduating pharmacists have been subject to such policies. I also want to remind the committee that some of the discussion seems to have been lost. And that was a discussion earlier about requiring schools to report academic misconduct and dishonesty to the board based on the fact that these are licensed personnel, the only students in the state of California that have to have a license in order to be a student. And therefore the board has an extra responsibility. And then if necessary, the board should ask for a legal opinion. I am not convinced that the federal law would supersede and that California could have a requirement that academic dishonesty can be reported to the licensing body. And also that we know that academic dishonesty from other studies around the world leads to professional dishonesty and problems. Thank you very much.
All right, that is the last request we had for public comment. Madam Chairperson, would you like me to go ahead and close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please, Ms. Moderator.
All right, it's closed.
Ms. Smiley, I believe that at our last board meeting, Dr. Gray brought up the need to try to make it reportable so that we would know if an applicant had a issue with dishonesty. And I feel like we've also had a presentation where there was a link, but can you remind me? I remember there being some federal law, and it started with an F, that I thought precluded us from receiving that information from the colleges of pharmacy.
Yes, it's the acronym is FERPA, and it was something we didn't pursue. Different of the deans thought that it was a non-reportable event because of student privacy, and because we're not going that direction, at least at this point, with respect to requiring a rule to make it reportable. We haven't looked at developing a legal opinion under FERPA about whether it would be permissible. That would be something we would have to consult with some other lawyers within the state, probably the Attorney General's office.
Okay. So let's go ahead and vote on the motion on the table. And then I will open it up one last time for the board members if you want to pursue understanding FERPA. And if we, if we need to get additional advice. So right now I am taking a vote on the motion that's currently on the table to create a policy working with the California Pharmacy Council, the executive officer, and myself, probably bringing back to this committee at some point in the future, but at this point we're going to recommend that to the board, that's the next steps that we think is appropriate. I will start with the person who proposed this motion, Sung Oh.
I support Debbie, and I do also support looking at FERPA more closely. I'm not an expert in this at all, so I don't know much. I do know Dr. Morello last meeting did say that it is protected under FERPA, but I mean, if I know that not all lawyers agree on everything, right? So we can look further into it, and I think that's probably a good idea. We should have a more robust discussion about it.
Okay. Cheryl, why don't you just give me your vote and then we'll go back to the FERPA thing. Cheryl Butler?
Yes, yes, I second and I support.
Okay. Jig Patel?
Yes.
Jason Weiss?
Yeah.
Albert Wong?
Yes.
Okay, and this is Debbie Beal, and I vote yes. So this motion to the board passes unanimously. Going back to the FERPA question, is there any other discussion, or does anybody like to make a motion around the FERPA question?
I just have
Sorry,
a
Debbie,
question. I have a question.
Sure, Cheryl.
The fact that this policy statement is going to be inclusive of the California Pharmacy Council, is that something that would, is it possible, and then also having both yourself and Ann involved, would that be able to handle that question? I mean, because the whole thing, for as I'm concerned, because again, I do agree with the fact, because when we see cases, I'm thinking if this was some of these things were addressed in school, maybe we wouldn't be seeing some of these things I'm seeing in some of the cases. So so I just have a question about that, or would this be something that we should have a separate conversation about?
Yeah, and I think from last call, our last meeting, I think a couple of the schools reported that that they would not share that information with us today. Like they might actually, discharge a student, but that they wouldn't share that information because of this privacy thing. So, are you thinking? So I'm a little bit concerned. I don't know if in our policy statement we could also tackle FERPA. Is that what you're asking? Is in our policy statement, can we also tackle FERPA?
Yes.
Ms. Smiley, do you think the way we our motion, the policy statement motion we just passed, would that give us the ability to go ahead and also seek a legal review of the privacy portion of FERPA, and if we could possibly incorporate requiring the California graduates to provide this, or the California schools to provide this information for any student who would apply?
I'd have to look at that for a policy statement because we didn't put this on the agenda again about a potential requirement for schools to disclose this to us. So that's something I think some of the schools would have a great interest in and want to be able to comment on specifically. I think in the policy statement, if it's a policy statement, it's not binding, then we might be able to say we encourage the schools to look at whether they can share that information or not, but I don't know if we could go much broader than that, and it certainly wouldn't have force of law. It would be a policy statement of the board.
Debbie, if I may, this is Ann.
Yes, please.
With respect to the legal opinion, so on FERPA, I think that you could go one of two ways. I think that you can just give guidance to staff, to work with DCA counsel, to evaluate the applicability of FERPA. I think if you want a formal legal opinion from the AG's office, I would suggest that you do a recommendation for that, formal opinions from the AG's office. I do think I think it's 12 to 18 months, and I believe there may be a cost associated with that. So I think it will probably depend on the type of opinion that you're looking for. Are you looking for kind of a gauge, kind of, sense of it, or do you want something formal, in which case there is a process to go through the AG's office to request?
Okay, so committee members, I think maybe based on Ann's comments there, perhaps we address this in a future agenda item, and along with that, direct staff to obtain a legal review opinion from DCA legal so that we can further evaluate. Does
Debbie,
that seem
Debbie, this is Song. I just want to make sure if we go and do anything related to FERPA, I think we do need to make sure it is completely airtight and that whatever we suggest is appropriate. So I do think that we should have it go through AG's office, just because, I mean, our legal counsel's opinion is, I trust it, I believe it, but what if there was ever a lawsuit that is against anybody, then I think that we should make it that it is well evaluated and that the state Attorney General supports our authority to require certain things. So that's where my thoughts are. If we do make any changes and require schools to provide these records of dishonesty, I think we need to make sure that we have the right leg to get on doing that. So that's where my thoughts are.
I guess the only thing, Song, is it, like Ann said, that will be 18 months before we would get anything back. And I'm wondering if maybe our policy statement, and maybe from working with the college, the California Pharmacy Council, maybe we're going to get some information there. So it might be, and I understand what you're saying, but I guess I'm also wondering, do we want to kind of go the quote unquote cheap route and kind of get a legal opinion, and from that opinion, then maybe we will, and depending on our policy, then maybe we will decide it's worth the expense and the wait to move forward with a deeper dive. And maybe that's inevitable, but maybe it might be prudent to take a couple steps before we jump to the 18.
Yeah, maybe it's a good idea that we do two-step approach then. So I think that would be okay. So we can do that first with the DCA legal counsel and then go from there. So yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Cheryl, what are your thoughts?
Yes, I'm okay with that. I do feel that, like I said, the California Pharmacy Council, the policy statement that's coming from that group that includes you and Ann, and I think that let's see what happens with that.
Okay. I mean, obviously, we still have to get the board to agree with us, but yeah. Jig, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with what Sung said and Cheryl said. Let's make it airtight so that we don't have any liability with FERPA.
Jason?
I will concur.
Okay. Albert?
I'm okay.
Okay. So, Ann, at this point, I think what we'd like to do is direct the staff to obtain a legal opinion from our DCA legal, DCA legal to evaluate and provide us with a legal opinion, and then agendize a discussion on FERPA for a future meeting. And I think as such, we don't need, it's not a motion. I think we're just directing staff. Do you agree?
If that "do you agree" was directed at Ann, yes, I agree. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay, so let's see, that then takes us to agenda item 9. It is 12:30. It's been an hour and a half since, it's only been a little over an hour since our last break. Is everybody okay forging forward? Or does anybody need a break?
This is Cheryl. I need a break.
Okay, how about if we take a 13-minute break, so we'll reconvene at 12:40.
Okay. So